Welcome to the Dynasty Podcast, episode 4 for the season. Going into week 5 with my partner in crime, Mr. Ziegler. Starting to find our flow a little bit, buddy. I can't believe we're a quarter way through the season already.
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird. I will say it's weird. Not quite a quarter, though. We got these 18 weeks now, plus playoffs, but yeah.
Not quite as weird as Wayne sending out a alert to the Discord, basically telling us to shut off our phones. I did a little research on that, and apparently there's people that thought that was going to turn us all into zombies based off of the Pfizer vaccination and some sort of thing that was embedded into people, and that it was going to be the start of the end of the world. Interesting stuff. I don't know if that's why Wayne sent it, but I'm fine. I listened to it for about 10 seconds and then shut it off, and so far so good.
Zombie stuff. Nation. Been waiting for the zombie apocalypse my whole life.
I would give it till midnight. Maybe at midnight, then everybody, depending on which time zone they're in, maybe it'll sink in or something. I don't know.
We're pretty close to a zombie apocalypse just by human behavior, so I think we're okay.
Yeah, just walk downtown San Francisco in the Tenderloin and you might think that you've arrived pretty close, or under a bridge in the Bay Area. Pretty similar effect.
Some zombie stormtroopers in Ahsoka. I know that's not your jam there, but that was something new, Corey. For anyone who watches Star Wars, they get me, and if the whole league doesn't, then fuck y'all.
Yeah, I haven't seen a Star Wars in a long time, to be perfectly honest with you.
The shows are good. Movies have been shitty, so that's why people go see them. Yeah. They suck, and then
I think I lost interest when Hayden Christensen played Luke Skywalker or some form of Luke Skywalker, and I was like, oh, that was pretty bad.
He was Anakin. He's better. He's got brought back, and he did a lot better in this.
Well, that's good. Human growth is important, no matter what profession that you work within.
I don't know.
So let's talk a little bit about the MVP race through 4 weeks. I listed out some odds of kind of who is in the running, and I just want to get your take on this award that basically is a QB award. We've talked about that in the past as well. But Josh Allen, after his humbling of Miami, is now a plus 350. Mahomes is at plus 500. You gave me the odds for Christian McCaffrey, who I kind of like as an underdog. He's at 1,000 plus 1,000. Lamar at plus 900. Tua at plus 500. Hurts at plus 900, and then Herbert plus 1,600. What do you think of those odds? And then do you think of anybody else being or having a chance?
I would probably only bet Herbert.
Yeah.
And I still think I want a little more. It's for such a weird award. I would never bet anyone non-quarterback without like 3,000 plus probably. Like, I think it's cute that they're entertaining the thought and that you are as well, but it's never happened. Dude, think about if we could go as an exercise and go back where a running back clearly was the best player in the league, right? And they gave it to a quarterback with average at best numbers, especially if you look at him now. And so, historical seasons, Derrick Henry had one, Adrian Peterson had one, and then I think there was a Jamal Lewis one.
Chris Johnson.
I mean, just there's been unbelievable. LaDainian Tomlinson?
I think
never.
But the other aspect of it is, do you have a dominant winning team and that person's the MVP of that team? So that's kind of where it gets. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't remember Derrick Henry's, huge season, but were they 14-2 or were they 9-9?
You know what? I take it all back. You know what he has going for him? Christian McCaffrey?
He's the best player. He's the best player on San Francisco's football team, and they're going to be tough to beat. No.
He's white.
Oh.
That's the only reason Cooper Kupp was the first fucking wide receiver to get it. I'm sorry to say.
He didn't get MVP of the season, did he? He might have got Offensive Player of the Year.
I think he got MVP.
Cooper Kupp won MVP of the season?
Yeah, dude. He had like 150 catches or something. He broke some records.
Oh, I have to look that up. I
We
don't
can look it
remember.
up. If he didn't, then you're literally talking about no one ever winning it since, like, I don't know, Lawrence Taylor won it, I think, one year.
Who
Like,
was the last?
we should have been a little more. I should have been brought up the list of how I didn't. I thought we were just going to discuss it. I didn't think we are going to entertain non-quarterbacks.
Last
So
non-quarterback MVP was Adrian Peterson in the 2012 season. He beat out Peyton Manning.
AP won that.
Yeah, so it's doable, and
I
that's why
that's
I'm with you on the Herbert number. I think Herbert could get hot here. They haven't had Eckler, and they're still they've won a couple games, and Herbert's putting up the best QB numbers, I think. And he could only get better, I think, with Eckler, and they could win some more ball games. So that's why that number, I mean, at least him, I don't know about that number, like you said, is exactly attractive. But I like the McCaffrey. If that odds I can get it at 2000 plus 2000, I think I'd put a little bit of money on that, just because I think San Francisco can go 13-3 or 14-2, and he's been just absolutely dominant without even having to really break a sweat yet. So I don't know, it could be interesting, and I could see Shanahan just like getting midway through the season and just trying to feed him gaudy numbers just to make a point that he is one of the, if not the best player in football. Tyreek Hill's not on the list. I think that kind of took a hit last week when they were humbled again.
he
But
still could break all the records that. But I thought I forgot. You're right. It's Cooper Kupp was the offensive player of the year. That's usually what they're going to give these guys, man. And just be like, take it. Like, and he broke everything. But if Tyreek Hill breaks all those records, and maybe, I just don't think so.
yeah, I would put it. I think Buffalo's going to falter. I think Allen's going to have an up and down season. I don't. I mean, he looked great last week again, and put up a dominant performance, but I just don't see them doing that week in and week out. Like, they seem to get in some ugly games and kind of play down to the level of their competition, and or just kind of falter sometimes. Mahomes doesn't have the offensive firepower this year, and the Taylor Swift distractions, I think, aren't great for the Chiefs. Lamar is interesting because he's doing it all on his own. He doesn't have any receivers healthy. They're winning ball games still. They're running. They've been hurt at the running back position, so he's really been the offense. If he starts putting up some fucking gaudy numbers and they continue to win, he could that plus 900 could go down quite a bit. Hurts. I mean, if they continue to go undefeated and he's putting up
Not Hurts
basically
this year. He's something's wrong with him. I think he's hurt. He's
he.
got
But
he's got no touch on deep ball, and he had it last year way better. Like, something's wrong with him, man. I'm
I
telling
did
you
see
right now, something's wrong with
I
him.
did I did see some stats though that his numbers are not far off, if not better in some categories than they were the first four games last year.
Not air yards, bro. Not downfield
Well,
passes. Not downfield accuracy.
that's
Not
fair.
even close. And, like,
Yeah,
dude, that's how they beat the brakes off of people.
yeah.
So I'm just saying, I
Uh,
don't think that's in play. The only reason Herbert would be is because I think Kellen Moore is going to, like, really. I mean, they lost Mike Williams, but I just watched them play, and I don't know if they went on a tear and, like, won that division somehow. He could be in play. I'm going to actually go back on my statement and say I'm sorry, because not only did Adrian Peterson win it, but LaDainian Tomlinson did as well, and Sean
yeah,
Alexander of all people won it before him. Right. But
it's
those were,
doable.
but the LaDainian Tomlinson, I believe, is still the highest scoring fantasy output in the history of fantasy, if I'm not correct. I think that
Well,
was,
he's
and then you have Marshall Falk before him. There was Terrell Davis, Barry Sanders.
so let me give you this 2022 versus 2023 stats for Jalen Hurts. 2022 yards passing 1120 versus 959 for 2023. 4 TDs versus 5, 2 interceptions versus 3, 66% completion versus 67%, 99 versus 92 QBR, 205 and 4 TDs rushing versus 134 versus 3 rushing TDs. So he's down a little bit, except for
Did you
completion
watch
percent.
all those games? Because I
and he's
get
had one more pass.
that's something wrong with him.
I haven't, unfortunately, because it went to YouTube TV on Direct TV. I can't watch full games unless it's I have to just
Yeah.
watch the Red Zone channel, and I'm not
Ask
a fan.
Roman, man. He'll probably say that, that Hurts's downfield accuracy has been a problem for him. I think last week they got some good. I mean, AJ Brown just got open like a mofo, so he was wide
Yeah,
open all the place. But like even he missed some wide open guys even in that game, like downfield. Like, and I'm not saying he just missed them; he missed them by a lot.
he
And
didn't
that's
look
like
good. That was a primetime game
I
that I
don't want
did
to say he
watch.
doesn't look good because he's like with the setting up the short game and screen pass, like he seems to me like he's as good as he always was doing everything outside of his deep ball. And I think
He
that's
just
tough. Maybe it comes back, but I think like maybe he's got something with his shoulder and he's lost a little strength or he's struggling with something. Maybe it works itself out. I'd be curious what Roman Argo thinks because he's usually pretty in tune with beat writers, and I haven't heard anything about him being hurt even in preseason. He just something feels off.
I mean, it could be. It could just be a slow start to the season. Do they have a new offense coordinator? Maybe something to do with that too, like not feeling as comfortable. Um, who knows? I mean, it. All I'm saying is statistically, the final numbers aren't that much different than his campaign last year to win MVP, and they're 4-0. So, and I don't see they just continue to win ball games and uh, not be. I mean, they're not even playing that good, and they feel like they're still winning. So I would
Their
be very
defense is
nervous.
not as good as it was last year, even though that their front is
Their
better.
pass defense has been gapey.
It's not so much that, but even though their linebackers kind of have been getting tackles, and Moreau had a good game. Like it's a liability to their scheme. It's way different than when they had Kaiser White and who's the other guy there? I just can tell they're not able to they're not able to get off the field on third down like they used to, and maybe that changes, especially when weather comes in. Who knows?
It could. Any other thoughts on the MVP race through 4 weeks? I'm going to bet on McCaffrey. That's my final after 4 weeks. Try to get a good number on that.
It's a sucker bet. I never bet the MVP. It's like the worst bet I think that exists outside of betting the Super Bowl. They never give the correct odds, let alone there's never, like I said, it's like, ooh, maybe Herbert sneak. It's like, oh, nope, they won't give me enough. Like they just literally won't, they won't even do that. They have like Micah Parsons at like 2000. It's just like,
Yeah,
what? It's like,
yeah.
it's like you would figure they would bait people more with the money, but they're not. So
They don't expose themselves
if
much.
I had to pick anyone, like I would just pick Patrick Mahomes again. Like
Yeah,
it seems like you should take the odds-on favorite if they're not going to give you much better to do different.
yeah. I would just be a little bit worried about multiple years in a row. Do they kind of start to try to give it to
Gave to
someone else?
Aaron Rodgers. Aaron
Yeah.
Rodgers probably could have not won it both those years, but he got them both the years. He
How
won
about
20.
him calling Kelsey Mr. Pfizer? That was pretty funny. Did you see that?
It was Kelsey that he called Mr. Pfizer?
Yeah, because Kelsey's in these vaccination commercials. So Kelsey's on a Pfizer commercial telling everybody to go get vaccinated. So he obviously got a pretty nice paycheck from Pfizer to do that. And so when he was Aaron was on the
Isn't A-Rod selling insurance?
yeah, slightly different.
That's the biggest scam of all time. No
Insurance
disrespect.
is not a scam. Coming from an insurance salesman,
Okay. Yeah, exactly. Only an insurance salesman would tell you it's not a scam. I
I don't
appreciate your
technically
point of
sell
view.
insurance anymore. I brokerage insurance deals, but there is, yeah, there is a need to mitigate risk in people's lives.
Except for when you think you're mitigating risk, you're actually not because of the fine print, and that's kind of everyone's
Well, that's
story.
why you have an insurance broker like myself to advocate for the on behalf of the clients with the big
I
insurance
know. I've
company.
been in a lot of situations. They do their best, but
That's where I get paid my bucks.
they
Actually,
get cuffed almost every time by politics.
yeah, it's a slippery game, but we're not here to talk about insurance today, Ben. We're here to talk about the art of man. and a man's role in society and how that's changed over the last 10 years. That's the subject I want to bridge for you today. You look super excited about this. The reason why I'm bringing this up is I am so tired and so sick of hearing and seeing exclusivity being formed in women's groups, both in business, well, mostly in business. So I have to deal with it all the time. All these women are sticking together now, which is fine, and they're excluding men from groups and trying to do business with women only businesses. And then they post stuff on LinkedIn or other social channels that talk about how hard women work and how they're mothers at the same time, and all the awesome stuff that women are doing, which I have no disagreement with. But my whole point is that I've chosen to be a more 50-50 integral partner with my wife's and I's relationship, but there's no way it's 50-50. It's 70-30 of me doing most of the things and 30% Roxanne. Now she has to put up with me, which she should get actual.
That's worth at least another 60.
Probably. So it might balance out eventually, but the amount of things that I do for my family on a week to week, month to month, and what I'm responsible for is not comparable. So those are the two subjects that I wanted to kind of talk about today. Is it right to be exclusive in order to make up for history by forming exclusivity women's groups, African American groups that don't let the white man in? Or is it kind of just kicking the can on down the street and forming different problems? And then B, just like men's overall role in society and how that's changed over the last 15 years. Like, I just want to get your input and perhaps the input of the league after they watch this on what their thoughts are on that.
Such a weird question, because it's like you gave me like three topics that can kind of not relate to each other with the answer. So your first concern is that there's exclusion by being in groups based off of criteria.
Yeah, so I say, okay, I'm going to go start a men's group, and we're not going to allow women in it. And even if I want to get even more particular, we're not going to allow anybody that's non-white in it. Is that looked on as a positive or a negative in society?
To the first part, because let's separate them. I don't like bundling them together. We have that. It's called fantasy football. Okay. Oh. And we're literally doing a podcast about it. So we literally have ways to get, like, even if it's fooling women, it's like, guess what? The reason I care so much about football is because I can guarantee that my wife isn't going to like it, and I will always be with dudes when I'm doing it. Now that's being completely
that's like golf. I don't think
obliterated, destroyed, and fucked over by your girl Taylor Swift, who is now infiltrating Swifties, and the NFL is making Swiftie friendship bracelets, and now all the ratings, and they're showing her 100,000 times, and it makes me want to fucking puke. This is my goddamn platform. Get everyone, like, women have their own shit, men have their own shit. Men who want to watch football because they like football is fine. Men who want to watch football because they wear pink because of fucking cancer and because Swifties are looking at it is a fucking problem. Because imagine if we went into, because this is like what you want to complain about, right, Corey? So why don't we go into some women's group that's talking about women's feelings, and we go in and shit all over it by telling them our feelings are more important and they're a bunch of fucking pussies and wankers. And now all of a sudden it's like, why are these guys in here? This is not what we want. This is not what we're trying to accomplish, which is having some sort of support system and doing something we love, which might be going and getting cocked on fucking wine at Wine Country or sitting in weaving baskets. I don't fucking care. But those are groups who focus themselves on wanting to do what they want. What you're talking about on a separate subject in being work environments, it is a little hypocritical if you need all inclusiveness everywhere and your rules to have inclusiveness, but then you also promote inclusiveness in what you're saying. So if their work environment is promoting, we have these special places for women and special places for minorities, and we don't have a special place for white people because that's racist, like that's where it's like weird and convoluted.
It just gets weird. It's like, I've just never believed in, first of all, great point on the women trying to infiltrate what we find to be holy, right? That Sunday watching football, fantasy football, could be golf for some people. Everybody's relationship's different. I think having women watch football with their families and put their jersey on, I think I'm happy with, I'm happy to do that. I wish my wife would watch football and enjoy it as much as I do, quite honestly. And I think that's what the NFL tries to do for viewership, is to make it more of a family event. That's why they're doing the Toy Story games and bringing kids into
That's
it and
cool.
making it more like a family novella or soap opera as opposed to just a sport, right? And I think that's kind of, and honestly, one of the reasons why we play fantasy football is because you come addicted to the storylines and the stats and the predictions and your team and all that stuff. So I'm okay with that. And like, it can be a family bonding day if you're making the food and you're rah cheering and you're up and down emotionally with your team and all that stuff.
Corey, do you think
Fantasy is
the
another
Toy
aspect
Story,
of
do you think the core
what's
Toy
that.
Story thing is actually for families?
I don't understand what that's for. No.
It's to promote football and youth because currently they have a youth recruiting problem based off of all the thing that parents, specifically mothers, do not want their kids to play football because of
That's a
CTE
good point.
and
Yeah,
publicity.
I
So
didn't
you
think about
can't
that.
get to a children's audience to influence them to play football unless you find a way to do it collectively. And now we're doing it with Disney, and that's pretty evil, but necessary for their corporation and their product, just like what they're doing with Taylor Swift. So it's kind of all the same of a fucking shithead fucking corporation who was willing to sacrifice my enjoyment of watching something for the sake of their fucking brand. Well, who am I?
Yeah. Interesting. Okay, so that's one side of it that we covered. The second side of it is the whole business and exclusivity and stuff. I find it to be wrong. I would never create a group and tell people that they couldn't be a part of it if they wanted to help, right? It's this whole problem in society now that, you have to listen to me because I am a minority, and you just need to understand that this is the way it's going to be. I'm fine. I've been nothing but supportive to minorities and people that are underprivileged and trying to help communities and do all those sorts of things. But what I'm finding more and more is that they're excluding people that are actually their allies by doing some of this bullshit, right? Like, don't punish people that have done nothing wrong by creating exclusivity and alienating yourself from the bad white man, right? Like, that's where I have a problem. Now, I'm fully willing to listen to people's issues and understand them better and things of that nature. But just like everything else that's political, I see that we have lost common sense down the middle morality when it comes to most extreme situations. And I would put this in that same category, right? There's a lot of good people that make sound decisions about all sorts of societal things that are not bad people, that can be allies, that want to help. And the right and the left on all these extreme issues are really fucking things up. And so we won't get into that today, but that's kind of my
Cancel
opinion.
culture is fucking things up because what you're
Cancel culture
talking
is
about,
another huge part of it.
you're talking about, there's two layers of things. Okay. Because you're very wrong in one sense is certain people want to have cultural, what they feel is their groups for their specific means to bond. I mean, like I said, we have fantasy football. There's not here or there. It's like if, to me, what you're talking about is like a big white guilt problem that's usually done by, sorry to say, mostly white women and white men who are feeling guilty about it. And now we have to cancel everyone who did. I mean, like, look at the Trevor Bauer thing you just showed. That's like cancel culture because of the Me Too movement. And all that is like, Trevor Bauer, we don't care what the fuck happened. You are guilty. We don't care if
Right.
you're proven innocent, you're guilty. We don't care if a judge said you're innocent, you're guilty. Same with Johnny Depp. Why did it have to be public? It had to be public because you had to show the fucking Me Too movement that they're fucking wrong sometimes. It's
Well,
not
they're
absolute.
public figures too, so
Well,
it
they're the
becomes
only one can do it. What about the people who
morality.
don't have $5 million who got canceled, lost their job, all because some girl was playing some fucking move,
Yeah, just
and that I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm not saying, but what I'm saying is when you go extremist and you create a cult out of something and to create a cult out of a movement, which I'm sorry to say, white people do much better than any other race in the planet Earth, then what are we talking about? Like, we're talking about like getting behind something that you don't even really believe in. It's just something you get to get mad about. And it's fucking really awful.
people
And
enjoy
it's the
being
worst thing
negative.
that has happened in our lifetime in society. And it's not close.
People enjoy being negative and pointing out people's faults, especially when they're on top, way more than they enjoy celebrating people's success. That's point number one. And I think all of this is kind of relatable. I think you're not able to speak out against things that you disagree with or question or are curious about, or you want to have a better explanation of, or you just flat out fucking dislike. Because if you do that and you do it publicly and people get wind of it, then this attack culture comes at you and says, oh, look at this person, he is XYZ, and they can cut things and cut the way you say it and paste it and put it on social media and come after you. And I think that's wrong. And I think if you have a strong opinion and a strong voice and you really are genuinely trying to figure things out and be helpful and impact society and do those things, you should fucking use that voice. And you have to find a way to do it respectfully, and also you have to be able to protect yourself. As a man, I feel a little bit just like undervalued these days. Like I'm not
Of
saying that
course. I
not
mean,
not not saying that I'm unhappy with my current situation. I love my wife, I love my family, I love all the things I do, but it's fucking bullshit. Because like if I put on a list of all the things that I do on a daily basis, a weekly basis, a monthly basis, and I compare that to that of what my wife does, it's not fucking close. It's just not. Like, and I'm okay with that. I like cooking the meals. I like it because I'm a control freak and I like to cook. I like, I have to be the one that handles all the technology and the passwords and stuff because my wife doesn't have an aptitude for that. I like tucking my kids into bed every night and reading them stories. Those are all personal choices that I like to do, but I would like to be credited for those things as opposed to being attacked, because I think the modern man has changed a hell of a lot since the 1960s and 70s and 80s, and even when we were being raised as young men, and when mom stayed home and took care of their kids, and the dad worked and cheated on their spouses or drank alcohol until 6 o'clock and came home and asked for dinner to be served. Like that's just not the way fucking life is
yeah, you
anymore.
can't tell her twice anymore.
Right? Yeah.
No wearing two black eyes. That stuff is toned down. The old
Yeah.
backhand. And
I
all,
just think
but
it's
to be fair, this is the thing, okay? You find and identify problems, which are like, let's take abuse, for example, and you want to mitigate them. You want to get things down to a level, and then everyone pushes and pushes and pushes until there's pullback. But guess what? Most men don't give a fuck. We want to actually get through our day without getting bitched at. And if it means we do it, so there's no bitching, we do it. And the problem is, to your point, if there is like defined roles that usually have these types of things and it starts to get a little murky, you either have to clearly define whose responsibility is what and identify that one person is doing a lot more than the other. I have a very similar thing in my relationship, you know that. But I don't I don't think the battle that you want to win is winnable because men really would rather just fucking do it than argue about it. And women would rather argue
yeah. I
about
don't I
it
don't
than
point it
just
out
do
all the
it.
time.
But that used to be flipped. Women would just do like, and they still do, don't get me wrong. I mean, like a woman will just be like, I wish this guy would pick his fucking laundry up and put in the hamper, and he doesn't, and then she does it. Like, it's not like this. We're not talking about it doesn't happen. I'm just saying, like, essentially, what I feel is that, the new man now is like required to take on, in theory, a lot more stuff, like you said, unless you have a very clearly defined relationship. And it,
Yeah,
and
and I
it
think it's
and it's
it's
not
not.
progressive to be traditional. So then you have to figure out how that works, and I don't know, stupid.
Probably just an overall frustration of the fact that I see women posting and talking about how awesome they are, and it's like, if that's fine, they are awesome. I think there's a lot of awesome women out there that work and they're successful and they are good mothers and blah blah blah. But you know what? There's also good dudes out there that do the same. There's also guys that have raised children on their own. There's also guys that have been physically and mentally abused. There's also guys that wear the pants and also are the nurturing person in a relationship. I think it's just interesting how, quickly people can be objects of the enemy, or be seen as an enemy, even though they've never done anything to to deserve that. I mean, and it's, you pay for a lot of the past history and things in our society. So I don't know. It's an interesting topic that I'm thinking a lot about. Maybe I just need to let it
Let it go.
let it go, and just continue on being the best person I can be, and then not worry about it. And
Hey,
the
hey
other
man, I
the
was
other point that
overwhelmed.
people be make is that the men have done this for years, and like we've had control and power for years, and so this is kind of payback. And I think that's just such a fucking wacky excuse. It's just a wacky excuse, if you
Hey
ask me.
man, that's man guilt. So it's all guilt. It's all just shaming into submission, and your history is why you owe me. And it's like, okay, like it's
Shame, shame, shame.
well, just put us in concentration camps and kill us then. And then you can identify you as who you really are, which is somebody who's trying to annihilate something that isn't the problem.
Right.
Sorry. White men are the problem. What? No, there's a history of white men being the problem. Okay, the history says that white men were the only people doing anything in power. That's changing. Black man was president in many countries. Women were president in many countries. Like, we need to just tone it down
Well,
a
let's maybe just
little
look
bit,
at our
a little bit.
generation. Maybe just look at our generation and how we're doing in our generation, as opposed to always looking at the past to justify our future, right? Like our past is literally 15 to 20 years old as grown men, right? Like I've been a man and fathered a kid at 26, right? Like I honestly looked at my wife when I was like, I think I just turned 43 or a couple days after, and I looked over and I said, you know what? I think I'm finally a man. Like I'm starting to get what this man shit's all about, right? Like because it comes with a lot of responsibilities to claim that title. And so I think our history as men in that category is a lot shorter, and uh, our behavior and how we handle ourselves as men over the last 20 years has certainly improved versus the history of man, if you will, right? Both
Dude, the
from a race
history of
perspective and
man was hitting a woman upside the fucking head with a bat and putting her in her cave and having sex with her whenever you wanted at will against hers. Like, think of how horrible
like
the.
cavemen.
Well, this is, I mean, let's not get off topic, but like, this is why it's like, well, man can be a woman, woman can be a man, and there's all these things. It's just like, dude, why was this a historical thing that could not be broken and is now being broken with technology and tolerance? But we're
Right.
still the bad guy. And I'll tell you what, man, like if you want to say whatever you want, but like Native Americans, do you think their fight was against the white man? Their fight was against the establishment that took everything from them, which was the United States of America and the government that did it. It was a bunch of white men, but that wasn't their fight. Their fight was reparations and to have fair access to their land and what they want to represent. And they've made incredible progress with that type of approach. If you want to take a type of approach that you feel that the United States establishment historically owes women something and owes black people something, I'm all for that conversation because there is a history
Sure.
of damage that was done. But I have nothing to fucking do with that. I'm sorry, sir
Exactly.
or ma'am.
Exactly.
I am. You want to come at me as a white guy for being culturally insensitive when I've lived in Costa Rica for 20 years and I have a Costa Rican wife and two Costa Rican kids, but it doesn't count.
Right.
Like, that's the narrative. It still doesn't
Right.
count. And that is where there's no there's no progress in true building something greater as long as that has to exist like that. Like nobody's
The
having a
other
real conversation on any side. It doesn't matter. It's just like,
there's no real
noise.
conversation on any side, except for it's so much easier to spread nonsense and form groups because of social media and the internet and being able to
Go
communicate with
look at
other
women's rights.
like-minded
Go
individuals.
look at women's rights and people of color's rights in other countries, and then talk to
Yeah.
me.
Right.
Like, stop acting like we don't have it much better than we've always had. Nothing is perfect. We can be progressive, but we can't be progressive if you're not including everyone in that conversation. And that's what the Me Too movement did to me. I was 100% all over it, but now it's like, oh, I got to stay out because it's not my thing, and I can't have a voice for women's rights and my daughter. And it's like, well, you're a white guy. You're the part of the problem. It's like, the
Right.
fuck do you think you
Exactly.
are? I'm a father. I'm a
Right.
husband. Like, who are
Right.
you to tell me I don't have the ability to believe in women because I'm the part of the problem? You're like, your institutions and your government historically screwed you over at the power of the people that, okay, let's say it was the men, but like, guess what? That's not the way it is anymore. So, like, let's be progressive.
One of the biggest women's only groups on LinkedIn. I'm a pretty passionate
Oh,
person
God.
on LinkedIn. That's kind of my social media thing these days. I like talking about stuff in a business setting because it keeps me without saying too much. You know what I mean? So I have to kind of really pick my words and be somewhat careful, but I like to poke the bear a little bit.
I've seen
But
you put your foot in your mouth a few times.
the biggest female group in on LinkedIn is run by who, do you think?
The biggest women's group?
Yeah,
Mothers
women's.
Against Drunk Driving? I
No,
don't know.
it's a
Sorry,
woman's
that was
only
the
group.
80s.
It's a woman's only group that was started by two men.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's the discussion, the pop culture slash review of week 4 for this episode of the Dynasty podcast.
A
Let
lot
us
of
know your thoughts
non-fantasy,
on
but
it's going a little off the rails here on a week to week
Jesus.
basis. Let's talk about the week 4 review. So just a few notes, and then I'll let you kind of put in some color here, Ben. We have currently 6 4-0 teams, and we're going to get into this a little bit. We have a whole power rankings of the top 12 teams and some notes on that. But 6 4-0 teams, 6 3-1 teams, and there's 4 teams that have over 900 points. The last 2 or 2 of the first 4 weeks, Moose has been the highest point scorer. We definitely have to give him props for that. He seems to be hitting his stride.
I think
And
Mando
then
was the first 2 weeks, and then he was the next 2. If I'm pretty sure Mando was the highest score first 2
I was the
weeks.
second week, actually. Mando was the first week. I was the second. I think
Oh,
Moose
okay.
is 2 weeks in a row.
Sorry,
Yeah,
didn't mean to
that's
take your
okay.
flowers
Just
from you, sir.
had to slide that in there for old
Hey,
Sal.
I know if it's facts, it's facts. I apologize.
And then we have Georgia at 3-1, which we'll talk about again in depth a little bit later. But is he for real? Is Georgia for real? He finally broke the
Yes.
200-point threshold, getting some key performances from some no-name people prior to 2023 season.
It's the Philly special Philadelphia Eagles that nobody believes in.
Yeah,
Better watch out for that boy.
I'm still not believing just yet, and I'll have some statistics to show why. And then kind of just a review of the Bills Miami game. What were your thoughts on that? We were pretty excited about Miami's offense. I think we kind of pumped the brakes a little bit because they hadn't really played anybody from a defensive standpoint that was extremely tough. I think they had played New England the first game, and they kind of held them in check a little bit. But what were your thoughts on the Bills humbling Miami at home in week 4?
Well, a few things. It seems like that Miami, is probably they're not going to be as surprising to the teams in their division. New England played them well, and they're kind of a dumpster fire, but their defense can kind of scheme well, and they're fast. And then Buffalo got a really good pass rush, but and Milano played really well. I didn't see anything that identified specifically on why they're doing that much better outside of they're getting it to a little bit, and the Dolphins were executing a little less. I'm not going to overreact to that game. I think if they play it 4 times, it's 2-2. I just don't think what we saw is any indication of something we got to worry about for either team. I'm not over celebrating Buffalo because that coach has been historic against his division, and I'm not going to celebrate against Miami because they've kicked the shit out of everyone else. So, granted, their wins, you can start to look back and see what's going on with that, but that's why, it's too early to tell. Let's let Miami get their ass kicked by a couple mediocre to above threshold teams that are possible playoff teams, and we can worry about it. But it's like the Lions beating beating the Chiefs. You're like, okay, cool. Not in December, not in January, and we'll see. Those teams are going to be very close during that time as long as they stay healthy, I think.
Yeah, I still think they're the 2 of the top 5-6 teams in the NFL. I think it was probably for Buffalo. Other than their stumble against the Jets in week 1, they really hadn't put up a complete performance either, right, through the season. They seem to be able to get the running back a little bit more involved. James Cook's had a pretty good start to his sophomore campaign, I think, which was a little bit surprising. There seems to be no issue with the Diggs and Allen connection. And it seemed like Josh Allen, instead of trying to win a game every single play, started taking letting his shots kind of come to him a bit more as and
Well,
taking
that's
what was
it.
given to
Let's
him.
see if he can consistently do that because we can see what happens when he keeps his ass in control. But when he starts throwing
Right.
ducats all over the place and putting himself in a bad situation, I mean, that's going to be essentially what the big issue is, right? And,
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll see. I just
And then
think,
Miami, I think anybody watching that game and seeing the lack of production from Hill and Waddle, right? Like there's obviously a strategy in place to take those two guys away, and make the running. I mean, Raheem Mostert came back to reality, shut him down. A Chain still had a good fantasy game, but it was more or less like let's take away some of the key weapons on the outside. And I don't honestly know how they specifically guarded Tyreek, but for him to have less than 65 yards and Waddle to have less than 65 yards and 4 or 5 catches apiece is obvious that that was part of their strategy, and took that away. Which if you stop the explosion from Miami and they have to dink and dunk down the field and then play defense, and they get physically beat up and you ball controlled a little bit against them and then have some big plays, I think that's gonna win more times than not, right? Like, and I think that's the recipe for late in the season is can you run the football? Can you control it? Can you convert it on third downs? Can you get people off the field on third down? And can you stop explosive plays? And it seemed like Buffalo was able to do that.
I think Milano played a lot in the box to stop the run, and they just said, I think with Milano in our front four, we can stop this running game, and then we could pull back Terrell Bernard and keep him in a shallow zone area to where that loft middle short isn't right there, and then they doubled him on the outside. So it's like, okay, cool, but you got to get him off of
Yeah,
the
and they're
tight end.
making
They
they're
don't have a
making
tight end, and it's just like, hey man, you got to get creative. And I don't think they were creative enough, although they did get plays. They scored. It's not that they got, blown out.
they also seem to be taking away the inside access, the inside routes, where I think Tua is more comfortable throwing the football and getting Hill and Waddle on crossers and slants and post routes to the middle of the field, making them attack the numbers on the outside of the field. I think is a great strategy, because it's harder to do. I don't think Tua is necessarily the most talented arm in the league, right? And so he's accurate. So making him force it to the outside and get people where they have an extra defender with the sideline is a pretty smart strategy. And I think you'll see a lot more teams doing that too.
Yeah, I think you're gonna find though a lot of teams aren't gonna be able to execute it. You have to have good momentum. They started it with a good pass rush. They had incredible play inside by Ed Oliver and those DTs to keep the holes from creating. And then, Milano was kind of everywhere. So like I said, man, I think if they did that same scheme, they knew it was coming and they played it's like it's a momentum thing.
Yep. All right. Did you want to bring up the last week's games of the week and just kind of show the league something new that we found, just to kind of have a little bit of laugh,
I'm
Ben?
sure Moose knows this exists. I feel like Moose knows everything that exists on this. He's always telling us where to find stuff.
Yeah, I
Um,
didn't know it existed though. It's kind
yeah,
of funny.
I
It's
didn't
just like
until
a
we were
Yahoo
just
thing.
looking around right now. So this
Look at that.
is, yeah, this is, what do they call it? Damn, I don't want to miss our spot, but
The
oh, the
games
week
of the
four
week.
recap, and they literally do an excerpt, AI excerpt, and then show these. This is what we needed this whole time when we were talking about it, Corey. And
Yeah, so maybe moving forward, I think we'll name the game of the week, and then we'll go back and just read this for a laugh, or pick some of the key stats from it. It'll cut down a little bit on our research, but go ahead and give it a crack with Penn State and Big Beefy Brutes, as an example of the information we get.
all right, well, skipping the intro, it says Penn State Nittany Lions were led to their 14.92 victory by a 24.6 point effort from Terry McLaurin, who got the Philadelphia Eagles defense for 86 yards. So the funny thing is, they're just saying like there's two guys. This is like a Yahoo kind of
Yeah, it's a
sub,
Yahoo league.
right? It's like, oh, you're starting like 20 guys, but we're only going to say two mattered. 20.8 point effort from Ayuk, who beat Arizona. It hasn't sunk in yet, says Penn State. I'm sure not, Mike. Big Beefy Bruce were helped out in a losing cause by 27.8 points with Cole Kmet, who got by the Denver Broncos, 80 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns, in addition to 1 yard rushing. Thanks. With this performance, Kmet was the #1 ranked tight end for week 4. They also got help from 20.75 point effort from Cameron Bynum, hit that over, who beat the Carolina Panthers offense for 9 tackles. We came out flat. Adding salt to the wound, Big Beefy Bruce could have scored 215 points and earned a win with their best lineup, but Brad left key players like Mo Alley Cox and his corresponding 10.5 points on the bench. Shame on you. Who did he play? Oh, let's read the rest before we go over this. Brings the record to Penn State 4-0, Big Beefy 2-2.
That's all. That's all you need to read.
That's it. So it's funny. It mentions the EFF, so it's like a Corey shout out, right? Like you could have won, but let's talk about who he should have started Mo Alley Cox for instead of who he played on his team.
Blayton, right? Or Brandon Cooks.
McKinnon, he should have put AJ Dillon on the ground. You know, Cooks, terrible start. Amari Cooper, terrible start. You know, there's Slayton, maybe, I guess, maybe, but like, I don't think Mo Alley Cox did anything. But again, that's like, I love the AI summary and making it sound like it was so easy. You know,
the reason why we wanted to highlight this game too is it was actually the only one that was one of the game of the weeks that was relatively close. The rest of them got out of hand pretty quickly. This one was going down to the final game, or at least the last 2 games, Sunday night and Monday night. I think it's a big win for Penn. I'll talk a little bit about his record being 4-0 a bit later in the power rankings. But Penn hasn't necessarily been extremely dominant yet this year. He's got a good offense. He's not scoring as many points as some of the other teams. He hasn't had any real tough competition, like large scoring opponents against him. So I think he's actually fortunate to be 4-0. But we'll talk a little bit about that later. So it was a close contest. It could have gone either way, kind of late into the Sunday and Monday games. And Brad got the rough end of the stick here, and Penn State won. So we'll check these more out in the future and extract some of the key data from it and use this as a reference point moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, both their quarterbacks were like bottom of the league this year. Or this week, you know, so that was one interesting thing that could have flipped it. And then, you know, Burns kind of had a dud, and there's some duds, you know, that happens. Like, oh, Kittle, you know, like, I mean, 1.9 is not
Burns
going to
and Kittle.
happen.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing week to week. That's why you have to have firepower throughout your lineup and hope that you get some big performances to carry you. You know, if you have a few duds and, you know, a few buys and an injury, or you can go from 200 points to 150 pretty quick. All right, let's move on. So the next section, I think we should bring up the standings if you can, Ben. And I actually spent some time kind of analyzing the top 12 teams. Any team that was 4-0 and 3-0, I threw them into the top 12 and ranked them from 12 to 1. So I thought that'd be fun after 4 weeks, which is a quarter of the season, to talk about. More than a quarter of the season, actually, fantasy wise. So the 12th team that we ranked or I ranked is, and you can give me your opinions on this too, based off of the notes that I took. But is our boy Georgia, coming in as the 12th ranked team of all the teams that are 3-1. Listen, the Cardinals quarterback has been a little bit of surprise. He had a good outing again last week, so I think that's helped him out. He's 32 of 32 against points against. So he has the least amount of points against him scored in the league at 583. He has gotten some production from some surprising places. I think Gardneck and McDuffie are both hits for him. There was the Chubb injury that brought Ford into play, and he's been performing as well. And then he has had good performance from his wide receivers. You know, Berrios had 20+ points last week. Josh Reynolds has been good in spots. Who else? Michael Wilson's obviously been very good, and he should be happy with that selection so far. So yeah, I mean, there's Georgia, and that actual picture, Ben. If you bring that up, that is probably what I would use to reference what the rest of actual playoff teams are going to do to Georgia if he actually makes it into the playoffs.
Oh, fair enough.
Because I don't think he has the firepower to really compete, and it's almost negative or would be disadvantageous for him to continue being delusional and thinking he does, because it's going to come to ahead here pretty quickly when he plays better competition, and he has to come up with when he doesn't have luck on his side with injuries and or his schedule with his bye weeks. So Georgia coming in at 12 on the power rankings. Any thoughts on Georgia?
Well, yeah, you talk about whether or not he can get lucky on injuries in the future, but he doesn't have to. I mean, Nick Chubb's out for the year, right? I mean,
Yep.
like, there's Braxton Berrios is going to be the number 3. Everyone else is on the IR. He's probably going to eat this week against that. It's got a high total. Sutton's been fine. Michael Wilson, even though I hate to admit how much he's been hyping him, like the tape and the reviews I've heard on his play sounds like he's going to be very good. He's also
Yep.
basically made all the other guys we thought were going to be like Rondale Moore and some others like pretty irrelevant. So he's doing that. I think, like, Logan Thomas, Taysom Hill. Logan Thomas is an injury away constantly, but having that backup, I don't know, man. Like, I'm not as down on his team as you are.
He definitely deserves credit and props for being as competitive as he has. I just think that he's been playing at his peak and his ceiling, as opposed to some of the other teams that are still kind of winning and getting there to their 200 points without having some of the best performances happening. The other thing is he has, I think, 19 zeros heading into next week. When I looked at some of the other competitive teams that are at the top of the list, they have like 12 or 11 zeros heading into
I don't
that.
like looking at those predictions because they're still giving, like, a cornerback I have who's gotten
Sure.
0
Yeah.
snaps like 9.5 points a game. So
Yeah.
the
I'm
predictions
just
are
saying
really suspect, especially because he has so many guys who are filling in for injuries. So those don't usually show up. And then, I don't know. I'm telling
we'll
you, man.
see. We'll see. If
I
he's
know
hitting
I
that
know that
178
I know
points through the
this
buys and stuff, I'll be surprised.
I know the snap counts that all these guys are playing, and it's not 0. Most of them are not 0. I'm just going to tell you that right now. So he's Georgia. I think you got a better chance than Corey says.
All right. Well, remember, this is the 12th
But I do
of the
think
12th.
the 12th spot is fair.
Right. This is of the top 12 teams. This isn't
As long as you don't
the whole
have
league.
me
So
ahead of him for some stupid reason, that would be nonsense.
yeah, I mean, I probably could have got a little bit more creative and looked at some of the other 2-2 teams that have maybe had tougher schedules or more
It's
points
not
against
worth
them.
it until it's worth it.
Right. Right. All right. Moving on. We're going to rank number 11 team, and that's Highlandtown, who has a big Penn State matchup, I believe, this week. I think the Akers situation is definitely one to monitor. Like, is that a better situation for him in Minnesota than it was, than it was at the Rams? I think so. I think he'll get worked into it, and if Madison continues to fumble, could be an opportunity for Akers to earn more points and snaps. I think Hunt being placed with the Browns definitely helps too. He didn't have him the first few weeks, and he probably will get integrated into the lineup more and more. I think Bosa's performance thus far has been negative, so that should help him. But that's going to be balanced out, I think, by Tutu trending down. He's had a pretty explosive start to his season, but with Cooper Kupp coming back, I think that might limit his upside. So Highlandtown I have as the 11th ranked team overall.
Ooh, he's got Van Ginkel. What a home run. What a Goldilocks wildebeest he has been.
Yeah, I wonder what that.
Yeah. He has some really explosive players who will continue to be explosive, and some guys who might regress but might not. I don't know. I think he's got a pretty good roster.
Yeah, he's got a good roster. Again, we're getting nitpicky.
I mean, he's
with
deep
some
at
of the
wide
top 12
receiver.
teams.
This is going to get through buys pretty well. Like those are some hard, there's some really tough positions to get through buys. Wide receiver to me is one of them. Because you got to play three, and sometimes that just feels gross. And if you can't, and sometimes you have to play four because you don't have the tight ends or the running backs to even bother, right? So I don't know. I
Well,
like.
look at, I mean, he has Acres and Hunt, right? Like, I mean, those are,
Yeah, that's a
that's,
problem.
that's, that's skimming it, right? And then
That's a problem. And he doesn't have these guys who are going to suddenly come out of the woodwork and play. So, based off of that alone, I would say, even in a really good scenario, that these guys get good snap shares, which they can, man. Like, again, Akers is number two, Kareem Hunt's number two. Gonna have some big weeks. We'll see.
yeah, I think his linebacker group is really good. I like his
It's
linebackers.
just going to come back into play on your matchup, your guy, your team, like having too many buys, however that works, I don't know.
Yep. All right, we're going to move on, do a little bit quicker. The number 10 team I have as Scottsdale Suicidals. The reason why is I think he just has a middle of the road roster. To be honest with you, it's solid through and through. He has scored a ton of points, and he hasn't had a ton of points scored against him. He's kind of in the middle of the road there as well. I think Moss has to be trending down because Taylor's coming back, or you would think so. So that'll be interesting to see. Moss has been highly utilized and scoring points for him. Alec Pierce is back also for Indianapolis. We'll see how he performs because he struggled in the preseason. That'll be interesting to see. And then Jalen Hyatt's hardly getting any work at any snaps. Like I think he had like 15 snaps the previous 2 or 3 games. Like it's just
The
not getting
way the way
integrated at all.
Daniel Jones is throwing the ball, it doesn't matter. He sucks ass. Until he can
Right.
complete passes, we shouldn't rush to judge anything, I don't think.
He still has a pretty explosive group at running back. He has Tony Pollard,
Yeah, he's
Dante
got depth
Foreman.
guys. He's a couple injuries away from being loaded.
Yeah,
Herbert
Evans is
goes
getting
down,
looked.
Foreman. Yeah, and it's just, Keyshawn is an injury away. Like, it's good to have those guys. When you have a next man up guy, like, you need some of those to hit, and then you can make a good run.
He's got good tight end group. Ingram's been good this year, and Hurts is still perform. Hurts is, um, yeah. I mean, I think he's solid through and through. But again, I think he doesn't necessarily have the firepower of some of the other top teams in the rankings.
It's fair, but I think he's got a good team. Definitely top 15, definitely top 10's fine. I like that.
All right. Freshly Squeezed comes in at number 9. Um, as the Gibbs owner, I think David Montgomery has been an absolute surprise. He came off an injury and had 30 rushes last week. He's kind of weak on defense, but he's led by his RB room and obviously Devontae Adams. Pacheco's been nice. Dameon Pierce is solid. He doesn't have a ton of depth at wide receiver other than Adams and Godwin. So and Bourne's been okay. Ronnie Bell has actually made a few plays. So he doesn't have a ton of upside at the wide receiver room other than the 2 guys that he's kind of leading with, but it's not bad. It's solid.
I don't know what you mean. That's as good as you're gonna get in this league outside of like 3 guys.
Yeah. But again, we're talking about the top, he's in the top 10, so we're getting nitpicky. I said weak defense. Once you analyze his defense, again, I didn't spend an hour doing this, but I didn't see it as an elite defense by any stretch of the imagination. His running rack, his LB room, defensive ends, not bad. Some depth there, but not necessarily top performers at those positions.
No, and these points are streaky. Charles Harris is getting a lot of run because of the injuries there. So I think he's in the 70s. So that's a good starter. And then the other guys are pretty streaky. Marcus Golden is like a wild card to get a sack any game, but can win you week if he does. So yeah, a little low there. And then Cunningham worked out. That's nice.
He's got 3 decent LBs.
Caden Ellis, now that Anderson's out, is probably going to be having to do a lot more work. Jack Gibbons got up to like 75% snaps, which was good to finally see. He was trending down.
Yep.
But I mean,
Safeties are good.
he's got three starters he doesn't have to worry about. I don't know how he doesn't have corners scoring points, considering if you were going to make a trade, corner is the easiest position to do so. Like, hey, homie, hit me up. I have corners up the wazoo. I would be happy to help. Safety room is very thin. Not going to spoil my Jeremy Chin take later, but he's actually in a weird no man's land where he'll be good, but not great. And so these guys are fine, but to your point, well, week 7 is going to suck, obviously. So some bye weeks. He's got massive week 7 hits on his bye weeks on this defense.
Yeah, on the defense for sure.
So when it's hard to be in this league and be balanced, but it's nice when you get lucky and it is balanced on your buys. I noticed looking forward to some have like real heavy buy issues, and that can be good, take an L 1 week and then be stronger than your opponent the West. But again, that all comes down to luck. Next person.
Yeah, Freshly Squeezed plays against Cocaine Bear in week 7, so maybe he gets a little bit lucky with that. Or Cocaine Bear takes him down and should have been a win on the schedule. And
we'll see. Cocaine Bear's talking about offloading his team, so it's all going to be whether or not he makes a trade for some of his big points off or not.
Yep. All right, number 8, we have Dominion, who actually has been somewhat surprising. I don't think he was on my radar early in the season, and I don't know why necessarily. He's got our boy
Bison's
Christian
team.
McCaffrey. Yeah,
and Bison
it's Christian McCaffrey or bust. Yeah,
that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, he has other players. Bernard's been a nice surprise. He's got the Bills QB.
He's hurt. He's hurt. Oh, he's out. Sorry. So he's okay. He's got some guys coming back.
15% of his points have come from Christian McCaffrey. I didn't do research. I didn't research other key performers versus their total points or percentage points of some of the other teams. But I think that would be an interesting research to see.
He's got my boy Terrell.
Some boom or bust kind of strategies with guys that have 4 guys that are basically scoring all their points, right? If something happens to one of them, it could be dicey. And I mentioned Bernard, who's been very, very good to start, and then obviously Allen came through last week, and obviously is scary to play week to week. But he's 29 of 32 points against. So if he runs into some stiffer competition, is he going to be able to have enough firepower overall outside of McCaffrey, Mixon, and some of his other key assets to beat some of the top teams?
Yeah, I mean, Myles Garrett and McCaffrey and Lamar are going to drive most of the force of this team. But
he's got Baker and Okirky. Baker hasn't played as much and as well as I thought.
Baker's losing his job slowly. I'll go over that later. But
Jesse Bates has been good. I mean, that's a lot of production.
Bates has been great, and Sam Franklin filled in for Xavier Woods. Spoiler alert: he played 100% snaps last week. So till Woods gets back and healthy, that's a starter. So that could get him some very needed extra points on this way to a push here.
And Eric Stokes comes back. I believe I saw in the news that he's coming off the IR or has started his window to come back at least. So that'll help him at corner. So overall, Dominion is
Marcus Jones who comes back this week.
It's just scary to see an Allen and Christian McCaffrey combo can score you anywhere between 80 or 90 points on a big week between the two of them. So that's a scary combination right now. So that's why I ranked him as high as he can, or as he is.
Next guy.
Moving on. Lazy Bears comes in at number 7. I looked at his team. I think Swift has obviously been a great surprise so far this season, but then that's kind of balanced out by Javonte Williams being somewhat bad. I think a lot of he has to be excited about the targets that Garrett Wilson saw and the progression that Zach Wilson made last week. So someone that was kind of underperforming and had such a high ceiling this year. seeing that kind of come back to a little bit of a positive last week was good for his team. He's just got a solid D and team all the way through. So that's what I put as the notes for Lazy Bears, who comes in at number 7.
He's holding a lot of
Njoku,
FAs, which is a little, that's tough when you got to hold a ton of FAs. You got to, he can't drop them because they could get picked up. But, we're looking at 3 at the wide receiver position, and then he's got 3 in the tight end position. Those are lost roster spots. It starts to get really hurtful when you get into these buys.
yeah. Just to point out, he has Luvu, Christian Harris,
Kenneth Murray
Murray. Like
still
he's got
playing
four
100%.
four solid linebackers. Um, he's got Chase Young and Michael that's been performing so far at defensive end. DeMarcus Walker's been a complete bust. Chicago can't get any fucking pressure.
Dude, I saw DeMarcus Walker had like 65% snaps, 0 pressures.
Hmm, hmm,
Zero
hmm.
pressures, 0 pressure. It was just something, it was 2 things that you look for in pass rushers, and he had 0. It was as bad as it gets.
Yeah, I don't want to go off the rails talking about the Bears, but
We don't have to.
we're gonna move on. Jamal Adams will be helpful. He tried to come back on Monday night and then got concussed, so he'll probably miss next week, which is unfortunate. But that could be helpful for his team too. He's got a strong safety room. I think I wish I had his safety depth. And then Richie James comes off of IR, and that's it. So
Well, that'll
again,
help
I
that
think
wide receiver room. That's nice because he's only got 4 and only 3 playing snaps, so he's an injury away from having some real issues. But getting Richie James back will help. He comes back this week, right? Is he on the 4?
uh, I think he's got to sit through
Another
4,
game?
right? So
Yeah,
yeah,
probably another
yeah,
game.
yeah. All right, moving on. We're almost halfway through. Hot Mess is coming in at number 6. Hot Mess been making some moves lately with some third round picks going for cornerbacks on 1-year contracts.
You have him
Very
at 6th,
aggressive.
huh?
What's
This is
that?
this is number. He's 6th in your rankings.
Yeah. So I have it because Cup's coming back. He scored a ton of points already. JJ Watt's been dominant. Keenan Allen's been healthy and productive. So will he stay healthy the rest of the way? And then he's making moves. And I believe of all the top top 12, he is the only one with a first round pick to play with as well. Not a lot of draft capital to utilize
That's a
some of
nice
these
little
top.
nugget, Corey.
Yeah, I did a little bit of research this week, Ben.
Appreciate
There's
you.
a few guys. There's a few guys that have some picks, but not a ton. I think Penn has a second round pick that I'm sure he'll burn at some point to get another asset. He made
Keeps
the
on
acquisition
jumping
for
too. Wow.
yeah. So go ahead and start up at the running back room, and we can dissect it a little bit further. But I have him coming in at number 6 based off of how he's performed so far and where he's at. So
Yeah, he's got good depth. A couple guys you start and some spot start guys. I think to your point, like man, he's getting Cooper Cup back and he's 4-0. Like that's all
yep,
you gotta say. Like Cooper
yep.
Cup, if he doesn't re-injure, he's just gonna get his load back, which Stafford clearly is giving. 15, 16 targets for one guy and 10 targets for another guy. I don't see that changing. So
I
Renfro,
think
I mean, he's got dudes.
I think Alexander Madison, I think obviously you're a Vikings fan, you know more than me. I think having Akers come in there and kind of push him even more is good for him. He's only scored 1 touchdown on the season, and he's still, I think, in the top 20 as far as production for the backs go for the NFL. So I wouldn't be down on Madison if I were an owner. I would actually think that he's going to
There
get
are guys who
more
shouldn't
production.
play 80% of snaps. Alexander Madison is one of them. He should play 60, and another guy should play 40. Ty Chandler couldn't do it because he can't block. So then we had to put in a fullback. Like Cam Akers can block. It doesn't even
Yeah,
matter if Cam Akers look very good, but I don't think there's ever a situation where we're replacing Madison. It's like we don't have a good backup. But like, if they can get Chandler on the field 10%, he looks like he's got quicks and he can get out. But dude, if you cannot maintain block integrity or even like, your assignments, like you can't get on the field. So I think Alexander Madison is going to finish in the top 12, probably, if he doesn't get hurt, like because of injuries and whatever else. I think he's just going to be consistent.
Yeah. And then so his defensive ends have been okay, not great, except for TJ Watt, obviously, who's been dominant. And he's carried him a couple weeks. His linebacker room is solid for three guys, and then he has a fourth to kind of throw in there in our bye weeks.
It's not
Safety play has
overlapping.
been okay. Um, yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe do I have Hot Mess a little bit too high based off of Cooper Cup and the fact that he scored a lot of points, or has he kind of reached his ceiling with some key performances and overperformed a bit?
I don't understand the two moves that he made. He made the move to activate Diaby, which is fine. I'm okay with the move. He didn't play a lot of snaps and he got a sack, and that's cool. But I think I like having that asset long term, but I don't think it helps him this year that much. He's got two guys he wouldn't sit for him anyways, but he's about to get early bye weeks, so man, it could work out, you know.
Who's
The
his quarterback, Ben?
He has the Eagles.
Oh, I
Your
mean,
MVP hurts.
well, he's been led by what quarterback Keenan Allen and TJ Watt. So if you can get Watt, Allen, and Cooper Cup, and to perform at their ceilings all season, he's going to be in a lot of games, right?
Yeah, the Eisen Christensen trade was super interesting. He did that with Argo, right? That was like a third round pick and a safety that wasn't
Yeah,
playing.
he's
So
been
here,
getting 10 points a game.
yeah, but like I mean, first of all, I've said how much I like this guy because of the way they are playing him. And I think he's going to be the guy he starts every week. Jerry Jacobs has been really good, but I think that what's his name? I have it in my notes. I think there's somebody that's going to replace him as soon as he's healthy, who was a starter. Not to say he won't play, but like, okay, so maybe you're down to Marco Wilson's getting 100% snaps, pretty sure. So I don't know. For me, I didn't see there was a desperate depth issue at cornerback, even though I think Christian Eisen might be something special, especially as a rookie. They're just going to keep going after him. But to sacrifice what now, he needs another move. Like you have two safeties on bye, and you're not going to be able to start a lineup, you know, unless the commish changed where you can start guys on bye. But I'm pretty sure I tried to start a lineup and you can't start somebody on bye. So anyone who's new or anybody who forgot, make sure you don't get to a week where you have to like trade for a guy at a certain position. You know, he might be trying to get somebody off the wire too. He's got so many FAs. No, that was the last
You
guy.
can also set your lineups well in advance. So if you see bye week issues coming into play, you can set your lineup for that week. And the guy can be on bye.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think you can.
I
How
don't
is
think you
Argo going to
can.
set a lineup at any week?
Free agents. I guess if you pick up a free agent and play him, that might work. I don't know. Maybe you can play guys on bye. I didn't think you could. We might have changed that rule because it would affect people from setting a competitive lineup. So in a way, I don't think. I think you should be allowed to. We'll have to confirm that in
You
chat.
either can start. Maybe you can start a guy on. Yeah, it
On
has to be a
bye. I
free.
think you can now. In our other leagues, you can't. But in this one, we might have changed that setting. We'll have to see.
Well, that's to be discovered. Okay,
Discord
we're gonna move on.
discussion.
Let's go with the top five. Coming in at number 5 is Bad Boys. Uh, Warren's a good GM. Listen, he's a horrible trade partner. And I've told him that many times, but he's a good GM, man. He's competitive across all leagues. And he builds some pretty strong teams. So give him props oh, he has the Buffalo Bills. How did I screw that up? Who did I say that had the Bills quarterback previously? Dominion. Who does the Dominion have? Anyway, I screwed that up. So he has the Bills QB. What if I put what I put for is Bad Boys overperforming? Callens has been a surprise, I think, with some of his production. I think he's got to be a top 10 wide receiver at this point. He had 160 yards last week. Um, very, very good so far this season. And then like people like Leonard Floyd, like coming on strong out and putting up 40 points. I think he had a pretty big week. Hubbard's been good. Max Crosby, three good DNs, right? Um, does he have the firepower on offense? That's the question.
On
All right,
offense
so
or on
let's look at his
defense?
offense. On offense. So Gibson seems to be getting more touches. He's a fumble away from getting benched. James Conner has been productive so far. Not much past those two, right? At running back. He's got Michael Thomas, who isn't always injured. He's got Westbrook Ikina that got some more clock because Homeboy's been out. They're number two. DeAndre Hopkins has been okay, but not great. Not a ton of offense of firepower at the wide receiver position. Hawkinson's been the best tight end in football next to Laporta, if you ask me. So he's set there and has at least Jimmy Graham as a backup. And then he has three good defensive ends. He has a linebacker room that's been okay. I don't think Josie Jewell's been as good as he would have hoped. And then he's got the injured reserve. So he will get Edmonds back at some point. We'll get touches and Deontay Johnson. So that's kind of where he's going to have to start picking up the pace with those guys filling in. So good top five team. I think anybody would agree that he's pretty solid through and through. But does he have the firepower that some of the other top teams have? That's the question. I think that will be answered over the next few weeks.
I can't believe he didn't trade Argo Pinnock for that value.
Is that just something that we can disclose on
Oh,
our
probably
podcast?
not. Probably not. My bad. I
Yeah,
didn't.
I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. People obviously get opinions on trades and stuff. Argo has been firing off trade offers left and right just to test people and their values, which I think is funny. Sending first round draft picks for established safeties and getting turned down for them. And that's okay. People are competitive. I think if I was a competitive guy with dreams of winning the championship this year, I would say, you know what, I got to keep my assets that are performing, and a late first round's not going to do much for me because how am I going to find that kind of production at safety, um, within the budget as well? So I don't know. What are your thoughts on Bad Boys team?
I think you have him ranked too high, but that's fine. I think the team we looked at last is way better, but he gets back Johnson, right? For sure, he gets back Johnson, right? He's not end of the year.
No, he's coming back.
Okay, so that's a huge difference. All right.
Yeah, then he has at least, three good wide receivers, possibly four that he can play. I just think that again, I think he's playing a little bit to his ceiling on offense and defense. He's fine, but I don't know. I'm not scared of his team, I guess. But if he gets Josh Allen to get hot, who does Dominion have at quarterback? How did I fuck that up so bad? Jesus, Corey, get it together. That's what happens when you try to crunch in all this research in a couple hours.
Like
Oh, yeah,
Lamar, dude. We
Lamar.
mentioned
Okay,
it.
so not much difference. I must have just been half blind when I was reading that. Okay.
What's
Same
number
things
four?
apply.
Half blind.
Penn State. Penn State coming in at 4. So he has the 20th fewest points scored against him. He's ranked 20th. He has a solid team through and through. Bateman's been a disappointment. Kittle has had one good game, I think, out of the
His
4.
QB has been a massive disappointment.
And that is the biggest question mark thus far, right? He's scoring on average over 200 points a game. But he's been doing it without Burrow being productive. So will he get right? Is the question. That'll be a big boost to his team. He's got tons of firepower on offense. I think St. Brown could be out this week. He's questionable. Bateman's been hurt.
Doesn't
Ayuk's
matter.
been.
He has felons. Most
Yep.
people would not have
Ayuk's been a
felons in that
stud.
position.
He's got three startable tight ends. He's got solid linebacker depth that are scoring points. He's got solid depth at every other position. I mean, he's just solid through and through. The deal, the real question is really if he can get Burrow to return to, 3 touchdowns a game and 300 yards and get rolling there. Because if he can, he's got the depth and the firepower and kind of explosion coming at you from different angles that makes him deserve a top 14.
I think he's going to be fine.
Yeah. He's put together a good squad. Is there anything else that we want to say about Penn?
No, sir. Let's keep it moving.
The only thing that I think he's been fortunate, like I said before, is that he hasn't had a tough necessarily schedule to date.
Did you put yourself over Amanda?
I did not. I'm coming in at number 3. We don't have to spend a lot of time on me, or I'll let you
there's
dissect
3
my
left.
team. Yep. Penn was at 4, and I put myself at 3.
Okay.
Go ahead, dissect me.
Why? We're running out of time. You know your team. Khalil Herbert and Brian Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs is good enough as anyone in a running back room. Adam Thielen is overperforming, but I think I said that he was going to, and I think he will continue to be the best wide receiver, that he is the best wide receiver. It doesn't matter if he lost a step. People forget that all he did was catch touchdowns, and he's going to keep catching them, and they're going to suck, and they're going to be in catch-up mode. And I think if Adam Thielen doesn't get hurt, look how much he's outscoring Calvin Ridley. And Calvin Ridley, that offense has been slow. I don't think that'll sustain. T. Higgins is out, but he's going to be good. The savior, Lord Gabriel Davis, who's worth 17 first-round picks, and you can't get him even if you offered it. And so wide receiver core is good, but I think, in my opinion, you're an injury or 2 away from having a real disaster because your boy Justin Ross didn't work out. Ray can get you a couple points with some return stuff, but he's not as involved. But you got to see where you're at. You have the best tight end on the Atlanta Falcons, and John Smith, as you pointed out. Pat Freiermuth as well. And you ended up with a starter in Miami. So super stacked there. Congratulations. Get through buys. Those tight ends, when you got a bunch of them, can help you through the buy fillers when you don't have as much depth in other spots. Devontae Wyatt's been surprisingly good. So I think that's going to continue based off his pressure rates and his snap counts. Will Anderson is the real deal. Even if he only has 37 points, he's going to be super streaky. Same with Karlaftis. These guys are going to go big games that'll get you big weeks. Daniil, he can't score 3 sacks every game, but he might score 3 sacks every game. Demario Davis is really trending down a little bit. His play is bad right now. His tackle rate's like 6%. It's something really bad. He's playing a lot of snaps. I think they still have to keep him playing snaps, but I saw Zach Bonds kind of lingering. So this could become an issue. I don't think it will. He's just the veteran. I think he's got to hold it together. And then Queen's good. He'll be solid as long as Roquan's healthy. So you're good there. Cornerbacks are going to be okay. They're not going to be explosive, but they will be playable. And your safeties, Andre Cisco has been doing well, overperforming a little bit, considering he plays very, very deep free safety most of the time. And Rodney Thomas worked out because he's been starting off the injury coming in. So at least you have 2 starters. Again, bye weeks are going to be tough in that position.
Yeah, I'm most nervous about my safety position, to be perfectly honest with you. I'm scrambling a bit there, but doing what I can. Lane, I picked up last week. He seems to be getting a little bit of work as backing up Derwin James, who was kind of hobbled with a hamstring injury. I was hoping that JL Skinner would get some clock, and he has not. Tre'Davious Moore, I was hoping would get picked up by someone. He has not. And John Johnson was a gamble that I took, thinking that he would get some action after he signed, and he has not as well. So maybe that'll change as
Lane Raheem only played because there was 3 safeties out. He's going right back to the bench, so I wouldn't rely on that. 3 safeties were out for the Chargers. That's why
I'm not relying on it, but if you have to put someone in, that's at least not.
He played 100% snaps, man. I mean, they got a good look at him. If they like something that he did, you never know. If you can come in and play 100% snaps, it's always It's always frisky.
Yeah. So anyway, I think I'm solid through and through. I got some explosive players that have underperformed. I got depth at some different positions, but I'm also realistic. I don't think I'm as good as the top two teams, and possibly kind of somewhere in between that 3 and 6 range. But I put up some points. I think I can put up points week to week, and that's why I put myself at number 3. And I've also won a couple of really key matchups in my division, which helps, right? I beat Moose. I beat Penn State already. I think were the two main ones that I've won already. So that helps, I think. Right? Like, who was the person I did beat in my division? Oh, and Highland Town. I've beaten 3 teams that are 3-1 and 4-1, right? Yeah. So I've beat 3
Number
of the top
two.
12 teams already,
Number
and I got
two.
Mandy this week. So
Number 2.
that's it. Oh, sorry. Mandy coming in at number 2. We're not going to spend a ton of time on Mandy because we talked a lot about him. He's getting Barkley back. I don't think that's necessary. That's a little bit of fool's gold for the next couple of weeks. High ankle sprains are, to me, very fucking limiting. And watching Giants offense last week was fucking awful. Is Reddick ever going to show up, and is Campbell going to show up? Those are been two of the disappointing players on defense. But he's scary as ever if he has no more injuries. Seeing Tyreek Hill, Jefferson, Barkley, Jacobs in a starting lineup any week with Mark Andrews as his tight end, and Tua as his quarterback. I mean, there's 200 points right there. I mean, if he hits on a week, and then you're just looking for fill-in players that are getting you 3 to 5 points or 7 points to the rest of your lineup. So I think he's got the second most explosive team through and through. If he has no more injuries, I think he does have a slight depth problem if he has any significant injuries and he goes into bye weeks. But we've all known that going into this. Bobby Wagner's just been a fucking animal.
You can
Campbell, if he
take
starts
zeros at
playing,
some positions and still win. We've seen that.
that's exactly right. He has so much firepower on offense in some of those key positions. I think Reddick will probably start getting going at some point, but if he does, Josh Allen's been a monster too. I had 3 sacks last week or something like that. Campbell has underperformed, right? Has he been hurt?
No, he got hurt.
Yeah. So he's got good safeties. Howell and McKinney, Donovan Wilson. So I think he's just got a solid lineup through and through. He would be number 1, except for Moose has taken over that throne with the last 2 weeks that he's put up. He's clicking on all cylinders. I think he has the most explosive team out there. I fear his lineup on offense more than anybody else's in the league. When you have
As
to
you
see
should.
Chase, Hill, Brown, Flowers, Tony out there. And then you have Mostert, who's performing. He's got the Carolina back, Sanders, that can blow up on any week. And then, you have an okay tight end in Okunwowo, hasn't really performed to the level that they maybe thought he was going to. And then just a solid defense through and through. The real weak spot for his team so far has been his defensive end position, which could hurt him a little bit. Will McDonald's not even getting any fucking snaps, right? I think no.
They're
He's
too
getting snapped.
deep. They're too deep,
Yeah.
and he's a rookie.
Yeah. So I would say if you had a weak spot, that is it. He's got Peyton Turner that's out. That might help a little bit, but he's kind of been dog shit for most of his career so far. So I don't know. He got a lot of production out of Harrison Smith last week. Finally showed up and had 27 or 30 tackles or something like that. So scary team, has depth, has a balanced attack at all positions, even if he's a little weak at defensive end. Moose has been scoring points at will, and I would not want to see that wide receiver court healthy in any week. So that's why he's number 1. That's it. That's the power rankings after 4 weeks. Thoughts overall, Ben?
It was a really long segment, but yeah, I'm probably swap a couple guys here and there, but it's pretty accurate.
All right. I'm sorry for keeping that so long. I thought it was kind of fun.
You got to do it. It's not that it's a problem that was long. I just got 30 minutes and I don't think we can get through all our agenda.
Well, we're gonna definitely focus on your two segments, and then we can skip the questions from the Discord. That's not that big of a deal. So let's just move right into keep it snappy. I don't want you to feel rushed. I know you got 30 minutes, and then we want to make sure that we talk a little bit about your cornerback gambling session. So I will shut the fuck up and let you keep it snappy, my friend.
Yeah, I mean, look, you don't have to shut the fuck up because that's a little, it's pretending
Well,
like I'm not doing this for
I'll just
your
pretend that
good.
there's a woman out there that's telling me that on LinkedIn, and I will follow my
You're
role
the
in
one
society.
asking me for bets. You should pay attention, sir.
I love your bets lately, buddy. If I just listened to you and just took only your bets, I'd be doing quite well, except for I'm a dumbass. So it's all good.
No, you've been winning. I've been watching you. That's good.
I've been
Uh,
doing okay.
yeah. Okay. So how can I make this much faster? So I
You
have
can take
up.
all 25 minutes though, Ben. Please do. We don't need to spend any more
No,
than
we
5 minutes on
have
the logos.
other stuff to talk about. That's important. It's fine. Let's uh let's break down a couple. I'll put this in sections for now. Okay. And then I'm gonna go through some safeties. And some safeties specifically that I've noticed are getting lots of box and slot snaps, like in really high ticks. Jalen Thompson is over 70% box plus snap a slot, and he's going to just continue to mash. And so I would just keep hitting that. And Grant Delpit is interesting because Cleveland is the worst team to target at currently, except for him. And that's because he's getting 82% in the box and in the slot, which means he's just going to be in the mix when there is the mix. And he's the only one that's probably hasn't really been disappointing and it's been consistent. Um, I would say Jimmy Ward, he's almost to 60% as well, coming off that injury. So he hasn't performed very well to that expectation, but I would expect him to get up in there. And then we have like a very interesting Jeremy Chin. Jeremy Chin is only playing 65%, and that was with Woods out. And Sam Franklin Jr., who I pointed out before, played 100% snaps. So like Jeremy Chin can't get back in his old workload, which means they just have this thing that they want him to do. It caps his upside, but they are putting him in the box 85% of the time. So it's an interesting thing where you have a guy who's getting 65% snaps that I would never tell anyone at a safety to play that. Like you can probably run with him because he's going to be in the mix to getting 5, 6 tackles and possibly some turnovers. That being said, you want like huge games from Jeremy Chin, and I don't think we're just going to get it all year. I think this is just proof after that that it's not RIP for blue chip, but like I would be considering other people in these other 16 team leagues. Taylor Rapp filled in at 100% in Buffalo. I thought that was interesting because he played fairly well, but he's playing like kind of a deep safety spot. He's probably going to be there for a few weeks. So if you're in a bind, it's not a bad one. Kyle Hamilton this week, one thing I thought was interesting is he had a 0% blitz rate, but then he played 100% snaps, and then he also still was over 50% in the box and slot. So I think he's just going to be one of the top safeties in Dynasty moving forward if he's getting 100% and he's a playmaker. The blitz rates might come more when they're playing different teams, but we'll see how that goes. And that's kind of with Dax Hill. He's at 100%. He still had around a 5% blitz rate, which is great, but he's played 67% in the deep safety spot. And I think that is interesting because he just went for a lot of capital, right? Didn't he just go into trade, Corey? Oh no,
I think there was a trade offered that was rejected, basically from.
okay, it was a first round pick, right, for Dax Hill, and it was said and it was rejected. Am I correct?
I believe
A
it
late
was
one.
a late first and a fourth round pick that was
Okay, this
rejected.
is inside info. Apologize. This is just Roman doing his thing, and we get to know his trades that get denied here and
I
there.
think it's interesting to talk about though. Like I mean, it's okay to see trades that are rejected. People show me trades all the time that aren't that aren't Roman and you.
Especially if they're
the,
bad. But this is a case where
especially if
he's
they're
trying
bad.
to prove
But
a point
I
that he
guess the
can't get a
question,
guy for his picks. And
The question is, A, you're a contending team. Are you trading an asset when you're trying to compete? Second is, what is the price for a safety that is performing and has multiple years left on their contract? Would you give, if you were a team that was not competing and you had Kyle Hamilton, would you give away Kyle Hamilton for a late first and say a second?
yeah, I mean, like, dude, like I'm take the picks, but if a guy's competing, like, I guess I just think if you're active, people like Argo, Georgia, Bad Boys, even Vito at times, Penn gets in there. Like, if you're aggressive and you make a trade for an intention to make another trade, like you could probably fill in, like with, let's just say hypothetically he takes the first for Dax Hill, like you can probably leverage that into a starting safety that isn't as good, and then maybe also something help somewhere else. So I don't know. To each their own. I mean, Dax Hill looks good, but
He does look good.
I I I I get concerned when I see a lot of deep safety snaps. That's like you get it becoming a free safety. Like we're not in first round value territory, in my opinion. But that can change week to week, so we'll see. We'll see how that goes. In all honesty, um, Rayshon Jenkins is another guy really high combo with some deep safety stats, and then like coming into the box. He's kind of been a disappointment slow, but I think his regression will come back as in, he's been regressed. He's going to come back and probably start having some big plays because he's playing up front a lot. Kyle Duggar got up to 90% and finally had a good game. Of course, I probably didn't play him in most leagues. I think a lot of people didn't. And I think he's going to have to play that much because the New England Patriots basically lost all their cornerbacks. So he's going to have to fill in. He was a crazy 53% in the box. I mean, that is really high for a safety. And that's normal because he does that a lot. That's been what he's kind of known for. And he hasn't played that much in the box. So if he is now going to play that much in the box, it's a guy you're going to want to start firing up. And
They lost Judon too.
well, they
So I
lost
wonder
Judon
what
on the line, yeah. And
they signed JC Jackson though.
no, they traded for him.
Oh,
But
traded.
dude, we
I'm
don't
sorry.
even know what his legal situation is. Like he couldn't even get
Yeah.
on the field. Like something's going on. Very
Yeah.
strange. So maybe Belichick can work it out. Maybe they lit some picks on fire. Harrison Smith, interesting thing is he went down in blitz rate to 12% and then ended up with 3 sacks. I thought that was wild. I expected to come in here and see like 25% or whatever, like he did last time, but I think they were just blitzing everyone and there's a lot of havoc to be made. The game plan was good. But he is only playing 18% in the deep safety spot. And he last year played like 79 or 80% in the deep safety spot because Donatello was a jackass. So, I hate that kind of last week. I said it's a matter of time when you're playing this much in the box, you're playing this much in blitzing, you're this much on the defensive line. I mean, his 25% on the defensive line and 37% in the box, plus 12.5% blitz rate. I mean, you're just in where everything is happening. You're eventually going to make plays, get tackles, and do all that. So Harrison Smith should be started with confidence. That was not a fluke game, I don't think. I think it was more fluky on the games that he was underperforming because they're using him like the man, right? Let's see. So Jason Pinnock had a super interesting game. His this is more for betting, for tackles. He got really high, and now he had a 2 tackle game, and he's kind of come down to the means. But I'm going to be really interested in seeing where his line is because if his line gets down to like 4.5, he's still playing 35% in the box. And so, like, I think it's an interesting play. So, Jason Pinnock is going to be on our radar when we go and look for these over bets. If he is anywhere in a low, like if he's a 4.5 or over, I would just snap it and don't even ask me. If he gets to 5.5, we got to think about it a little bit, but I'd probably still do it. And then anything after that, probably do it. So, there's a little quick
I like
safety.
that.
There's a little quick safety bet to put in the back of the head just in case I slack like I did last week, which is my apologies. Brandon Jones played 100% and he was playing for injury. If you got him, cool, play him. He's going to play for a few weeks, but he's a free safety, not a lot of action up front. Cameron Curl, though. Cameron Curl is really in play for the number one safety scorer this year, even though his points haven't been crazy. His statistics, he's playing 50.7% in the box. He's always a 100% snap guy. And his role doesn't change a lot. He plays 14% in the slot. He blitzes 3 to 5%. He's on the D line 5 to 10%. He's a very good plug and play for this defense. And he is also gonna have some really big games, like randomly, like the Harrison Smith and some of these. When you let guys get that close all the time, they're gonna have these crazy 30, 40 point explosions. And that's the kind of stuff that wins in BC, right? Whereas, Dax Hill, when we're going back to that, he's not quite getting that type of action up front. So he can get some interceptions. You could see this and that, but when you're in the mix, like you're in the mix at the line, you get the tackles, fumbles, all that stuff. You're hitting people more. It's just good to target those guys. So that's my safeties for this week, Mr. Corey. And we'll go to the linebackers and defensive linemen. This will be pretty quick because even though we got a bunch of guys here, it's pretty obvious what we're going to talk about, and I'll get it quick. So Ezekiel Turner filled in at middle linebacker for Arizona. They have two other guys who can come in and fill in if they get healthy. He did get 8 tackles, and he actually looked good. So 21% tackle efficiency is pretty damn good. So he's probably worth playing until these guys get healthy and seeing he could actually take that job over if he's going to continue to be that efficient. Another guy, Nate Landman, excuse me. He's filling in for Troy Anderson. He played 81% and got 12 tackles, also 22% tackle efficiency. So the reason these guys are being brought up is because they're not 100% snap guys, but when you have high tackle efficiencies and are getting high tackles and you're playing in for injured guys, usually you keep that job or have a potential to take it over. Anderson is out for the year. So if you got Nate Landman, which obviously I looked all our leagues he's taken, which made me sad, you're going to do pretty good. Patrick Queen had a abysmal 3 tackles, which reminded me of the old Patrick Queen. His tackle efficiency was 4%. And I would say this is part blowout and part probably Roquan was doing a lot of the dirty work. I was talking to Baltimore fans in the bar, and we agreed that Patrick Queen was hot trash last year all the way until Roquan got there, and now he knows what he's doing. He doesn't have to take responsibility. I'm going to point this one out because this is going to be another bet that we're going to go look at. If these 3 tackles make him down to like 7.5 or something silly like that, we are going to hit that over hard. He's still in his 100% role. They still depend on both those linebackers to get bulk of the tackles. So we're going to look for Patrick Queen on these little bets. Terrell Bernard, very similar, 100% snaps, very game script. They use him a lot in the which is very interesting for him keeping 100% snaps. They used him in a lot of pass coverage and let Milano get up to the line. And that's the good compliment that they really wanted with Edmonds originally, because when Milano can get downhill, he's an absolute game changer.
I'll be back, David. Sorry.
All right, no worries. So Terrell Bernard at 5 tackles this week was a disappointment, but if they keep that one low, we're going to look at the over. Of course, Corey walked out. I'm going to talk about his boy, Jack Sanborn. Jack Sanborn played 65% of snaps kind of out of nowhere after playing like very low. I don't know if the Bears are going to make it a trend, but it looks like, 265% of the snaps were given to linebackers, which is very rare these days. So I would keep an eye on that. Decent tackle efficiency, but we know, Mr. Jack Sanborn can get it done. Dallas, I have DeMarcus Lawrence is in panic mode. He only played 45% snaps, and his efficiency is really taking a little bit of a hit. I think he's going to be super streaky, and I think you're going to have to be okay with him getting you 12 and then 2 and then 16 and then 1. And those are frustrating DNs to be playing with. Obviously, in BC, you need to use it, whoever you have, but in other places, if you can consider other people, it's probably best. Drew Sanders for Denver got 80% snaps. Now, Josie Jewell was out, but he was super efficient with it. Well, he had 7 tackles, but his grades, and he played a lot in 3rd and 4th down. So that's a good step for Drew Sanders in the right direction. The next guy, Jack Campbell, not so much. He played 61% of the snaps and got 1 tackle, 2.9% tackle efficiency. Jack Campbell is not ready to play football. I don't care what anyone says. They're forcing him in there, and everyone's saying, why isn't he playing? But you cannot play that much time and get 1 tackle if you're supposedly this freak show, rangy guy who can get sideline to sideline. No, the guys that get 60% snaps that are those types, they get 5 tackles. And so I am a little nervous if I'm a Jack Campbell owner. I'm not going to completely overreact to this, but this is a really, really bad number. Like it's a problem, and we'll see next week if they even like let him get run. I mean, Malcolm Rodriguez, for example, never even got close to this core of an efficiency of a game with so many snaps. Next up is the Houston linebackers. We have Henry To'oTo'o, who started full time, and then Christian Harris also started and got 90%. And Christian Harris was good. So I don't know. He's going to start next week because of injury. I think they're both startable. I like To'oTo'o's secure role to like just LB borderline 1, put him. But Christian Harris lost his job, but now he's got it back. Let's see if his talent can raise up, and maybe those 2 guys just take it from here. I would react next week if we see these same numbers by both, and I would just assume they're starting the rest of the year. That's that's D'Amico Ryans' style. It's what he wants to happen. So if they can, then they will. Those 2 guys will be the starters the rest of the way. DeForest Buckner, very weird game, 25% snaps. I think he got a little dinged up, but I think they're like using him sparingly, and I don't understand what's going on. I would take a week or 2 to figure that one out. It just doesn't make a lot of sense for me. On that line, Indianapolis had an injury to Shaq Leonard. EJ Speed is going to be the guy. He'll probably get 100% snaps in his replacement. So I would fire up EJ Speed if you got him. Chad Muma played 100% in line from Devin Lloyd. He was okay. But if he balls out in the next game or so, man, they're going to have to really look, because Lloyd has been pretty bad in general with his grading. Devon Diablo got down to 70%, and I didn't see any injury news, only 3 tackles. He's been dipping, and that's a problem. I think I would be very nervous if I was a Divine Diablo owner, and I would take caution in playing him if you have somebody better and see how that happens, right? Aaron Donald is back. If you sat him for any reason, you were overthinking it. He had a 30% pressure rate on the quarterback and 25% QB pressures. I mean, he's insane, and he's back. So we were like, where's Aaron Donald? Where's Aaron Donald? His statistics had been that he was winning, and now they're not only is he winning, he's playing high play time. That's just, don't overthink it. Play Aaron Donald the rest of the year. So for the Chargers, Joey Bosa is out with a hammy. They have a bye, but I don't think he's going to play for probably 3 or 4 weeks. So Tuli Tuipulotu is a dude you need to fire up too. He got 87% snaps, and that's going to be a guy that's going to be good risk reward play going forward. The evil David Long from Miami is the hardest thing I've ever figured out. I have him on a couple teams. I can't figure out when to start him. Now with Phillips out, they have Van Ginkel, and he is going to play almost 100% snaps on the edge, but he's so good at rushing the pass rusher that when Phillips comes back, they're going to have to put David Long back on the pine. However, it looks like they might keep David Long there and take Baker out. So this is a situation you just have to really keep watching. But I would start David Long Jr. on Miami for the next week or so until Phillips comes back, and then also watch the snap counts on Baker. Sorry for Baker owners. I have him in the league. It looks like he's cash. Minnesota, Marcus Davenport came in his first game. I think pregame, I talked about what a bust it was to pay him what he was. Now he's our savior for the Minnesota Vikings. 62% snaps, high pressure rate, did a really good job while he was in there. I could see him having success in the system, so I would start firing him out if you haven't. Obviously, if you have big time studs, don't do it, but he is definitely like a DN3 that should be considered. Corey mentioned Matt Judon's out. Just keep an eye on that. That's going to be interesting. They have what's his name? Keon White and Uche are the two guys who'll be fighting for that. So somebody's going to rise to the top. Judon's out for the year, so there's going to be somebody who's going to get a good spot there. And the Philadelphia linebackers, I don't love to talk about them, but they are getting high usage and high tackle numbers, and the efficiency is what it is, but like you just got to play them. You just got to play them. I'm going to consider taking their overs. Their overs we'll see next week, but they've usually been low, 6.5 tackles. I just think that, that team funnels to the middle linebacker. It's kind of a weakness when they have these guys, but they're going to get tackles. So we'll see what happens. And then Levante David and Devon White both played 100% snaps, both had 5 tackles, and both had a very low tackle efficiency. They had the same line. It was insane, but I wouldn't be too scared about keeping those guys going. That's it, Corey, if you're haven't fallen asleep yet.
I'm still here, buddy. That was excellent preparation and delivery on your part. One of the most thorough IDP sessions that I think I've ever encountered, and I appreciate you for it.
Yeah, no problem.
Do we want to, I know you have a time crunch here. Do you want to go straight into your betting corner, or do you want to do the games of the week quick and then see if we have time for the betting corner?
I will blow through this betting corner because
okay.
I can, and I'll text the rest of it.
Okay.
But it's more about who I'm looking at. So I'm looking at AJ Terrell from Atlanta, 100% snaps. He's only a wide corner, but he's gotten low tackle numbers or low targets recently, so I think his number is going to be down. He's going against Houston. Houston top 5 pass attempts per game. I don't know if you knew that, Corey, but Houston is top 5 in pass attempts. So the other corners we can't really play. They mix them in too much. But I'm gonna be really looking at AJ Terrell's line, and we are going to be going over on that if we can. Teron Johnson has been playing only about 86% snaps, but they lost a couple guys. I think White went down for the year, so they are really short, and he's been playing exclusively slot or box, right? So he has not even been playing wide. He's playing either on the slot 76% of the time, or he's playing in the box up. He has a 5% blitz rate. His tackle numbers haven't been super high. We're going to hit that over because Jacksonville is 8th in pass attempts per game. Your boy, even if you don't know who your boy is, Corey, Terrell Smith for the Chicago Bears, got 100% snaps last week. I look at this, he played almost exclusively 90% plus in the outside position. He is now the defined cornerback 2, and I would look for any team playing against them to try and expose this kid. Even though he looks good, he's going to probably get a lot of targets. So I am going to say if we can get a Terrell Smith, I don't know on Thursday if they're going to put him on the line, but I'm really keen to put him in an over bet because they might have him as low as like 2.5, 3.5. He's not done much, but he hasn't been. Last week was the first time he got 100% snaps, and I think this week we might see somebody. We might see. You're playing Washington, right, Corey?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Could be an
could.
ugly game.
Yeah, I could see them exposing that, right? Or at least trying to test him. So even if they're throwing at him and he gets like catches and or tackles, that's like what we're looking for, right? Deron Bland, man, that kid is. I got to see where they're going to put his tackles. He's just a tackle machine. He doesn't play 100% snaps. He's playing 80, but I'd like that matchup, and I think it's something we're going to want to target. Even without Diggs, he's just going to have to play a lot, and they're going to have to ask him to do a little more on the outside. And I think I saw his targets; he's getting peppered. So there, even though he's been doing well and he's scoring a lot, like I think the defenses still don't think he's what it is, right? So I think he's gonna be targeted a lot. Another good over. Jerry Jacobs is Detroit. Jerry Jacobs, we need to watch if Mosley plays, because if he plays, then we need to not bet it. So this would be like a game time type thing, or as soon as Mosley is ruled out. Um, Jerry Jacobs had like 10 targets against him, 8 the week before, I believe. He's a guy who people think sucks. His numbers say he sucks. He's scoring lots of points because they're throwing at him. So we're going to want to keep going to that well and to hit that. Shaquille Griffin for the Houston Texans. He's around 100% snaps. He had 8 targets last week, 10 targets the week before. Those are the first 2 games he played 100% snaps. Again, he's getting crazy picked on because he's guarding, I think, the best player, and they don't care, and they're just going to go straight at him. So Shaquille Griffin for the over. Tyson Campbell, I'm going to like him for the over as well, kind of for the same thing on that Jacksonville game. Where are we at here? So Kansas City, Minnesota is the biggest game of the week for these cornerbacks or for snap totals. They have the 2 top teams in pass attempts, and we know the Vikings can't get off the field on third down in general. And so we are going to be taking Ladarius Sneed, Trent McDuffie overs all day. We're going to probably take a Caleb Evans overs, and depending on where it is at, Byron Murphy, but I'd probably rather take a lot of these safeties that range around. But I think that game, you can just pick a DB or a cornerback and take over and feel pretty good about it. I'm just at discretion, but I would go very heavy on that game. Michael
I like
Davis. Michael Davis for the Chargers. I have him in BC, so I've gotten to witness this. He is no respect. I think he's averaging 10 targets a game. He's getting peppered. He had 11 last week. So to your point, Corey, is like, how do you get these wide receivers cornerbacks? Well, if you're going to stream cornerbacks, you need to find out who's trending that defensive coordinators think sucks. That's usually rookies get tested in that way, but new starters are usually doing that. Michael Davis falls in that category, and they're getting thrown at the most. So after that, the New York Giants, I think we're going to look at Deontay Banks and Adoree Jackson as well. Miami has the passes at a crazy high rate. I think they're in the top 3. And they're going to be shadowing these 2 beasts of Hill and Waddle. So I think now's the time to probably expose those corners. Darius Slay, same thing, going against the Rams. Rams are number 1 in the NFL in pass attempts. That's pretty wild. And that's, you can see by these targets these wide receivers have been getting. But Slay was targeted 11 times last week. If with Bradbury on the other side, it's not going to change. We're going to take his tackle overs unless there's something crazy like 6.5. I would almost probably go as high as 5.5. We're hoping to get it at 4.5. San Francisco, same thing. San Francisco and the Cowboys. Cowboys are going to have to pass, assuming this goes to the narrative that San Francisco stopping the run and kind of forcing the pass. So Tre'Davious Ward, Amandre Lenoir, we're going to try and see those lines. I like hitting over on both of those as well. And then Kendall Fuller for Washington. He's the number one, who has not been playing very well. And number ones who don't play well usually eventually get demoted to number twos, but until they do, we like to expose that. He had 13 targets against AJ Brown last week. I mean, they just basically said, we think AJ Brown will never lose a snap, so we're going to constantly go to their number one, which is Kendall Fuller. So I think we should be keen on checking his tackle overs and hitting that. And that's all I got for our betting corner of cornerbacks. And I hope you learned something about analyzing cornerbacks in that as well, Corey.
It's great. I can't wait to apply some of that knowledge for this Sunday and win some cash starting as early as Thursday with the Bears Washington game. So
there's some bets.
I find it valuable. It's intense stuff. I admittedly am not as strong knowledge base on the IDP side, so that definitely gives me some analysis and some opportunities to go do some of my own research and use some of the tools and wisdom that you're applying here to figure out who I should be approaching and starting in fantasy lineups as well. So thank you very much for doing that, Ben.
Yeah. You want corners that suck or that defenses don't respect. That
makes complete sense.
Or corners who are crazy good at tackling.
So 5 minutes, right? You have to be done at 3:30.
Well, no, I got a little bit of time. We'll see how far
we're not going to spend a ton of time on this, but we're going to go into the games of the week. We picked 4 games this week. I'm going to start off, and then we'll go every other one. Bad Boy and Moose, both powerhouse teams in the top 5. We got ranked Bad Boy at number 5 going against Moose, the number 1 ranked guy in all of BC. Bye weeks are minimal for both teams. Moose is kind of helped by his QB bye. I think he has the Cleveland Browns quarterback, so the average points probably will be higher from the quarterback position. So I think he actually gets a little bit of help there. This is a wide receiver versus defense. And the wild card positions for Bad Boys, if he wants to upset Moose, is going to be Gibson, Hawkinson, and Collins. I'm predicting a Moose win in deciding fashion. That's my game of the week. Bad Boy versus Moose is a Moose win in a 20+ point performance.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, we just went through both their teams, and I think Moose currently has the healthiest and strongest team, especially if buys are helping and not hurting. That's usually it's tough. But Bad Boys has a good team, so it's you never know. But I like. All right, I picked the same.
Go ahead with your first game of the week, Ben.
Oh yes. Oh, sorry. I didn't. Let me see where I have all that pulled up here.
You have me versus Mandy, and I believe Highlandtown versus Penn are as your 2 games of the week.
Okay, so let's do you last. So it's Highland versus Penn. Sorry, here we go. There. Yeah, okay, so Highland has his QB on bye, which is the Chargers, so I think that's opposite of, the Moose effect. I think you want the Chargers numbers almost every single time. Penn, we'll see if his QB can get right and score him some good points, but that'll be where it's interesting. I think in general, the advantage at almost all positions does go to Penn if you were going to take one or the other. Their wide receivers are going to be pretty close, but I still think Penn's are better. And as we go down, the DNs favor Highland, right? And so do the linebackers as far as a couple really high-end scoring guys. But Penn's going to be playing 3. Drew Tranquil is interesting. He got 100% snaps and subs, so it's going to be kind of whether or not, but he kind of sucked with them. But it's going to be whether or not Bolden comes back, on whether or not he probably will be very productive, and that'll help Penn a lot. Sneed is on our boy Highland, who I think is going to have a real game, but so is I think Kendall Fuller as well. So that kind of wears out. Yeah, I think safeties, they're pretty close, and I got to give it to Penn, man. It's just he's got too many edges at too many positions. I think having that bye in the Chargers is not a good thing. I think, Herbert's going to just continue to put big numbers up. So that's my throwdown there.
All right, good analysis there, Ben. We're going to move on to Jesus versus sin. I want to point out that Jesus defeated cocaine last week, and my prediction is that sin is going to catch up with Jesus this week and defeat him in a close matchup. A little play on words there for the podcast listeners.
Oh, I
It's the
haven't set
battle
my
of
best
two.
lineup yet.
Yeah, I looked at everything. I didn't look at the current situation. It's a battle of 2 and 2s. I think this is a really important lineup or important week for both teams. Jesus is hanging in there in a tough division, and Sin's been somewhat underperforming, I believe, as a competitor this season. It's really going to come down to whether or not he's going to get better performances from the likes of Jerry Jeudy, Jalen Waddle, Kyle Pitts, some of these high draft capital assets that have really, to be honest with you, underperformed for most of their careers the last couple of years. He has Addison as well, that could possibly be a good game scripted versus Kansas City. So I think it comes down to that. Jesus probably is going to get a little help from McLaughlin coming into play this week as the Denver running back. I think he's been the most explosive weapon in the Denver backfield. P. Ryan's looked kind of a little bit shaky to start the season. They may trust him a bit, but McLaughlin seems to be getting more snaps, especially in the 2-minute offense. I think could be where he sees some tick in production, even if Javonte plays. And the last note that I made is that Sin has 0 buys this week, and Ben has, I believe, 4 key ones. So that could
I
hinder
got a lot of
Ben's
buys.
production this week. So again, Sin to win versus Jesus in a close one.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to argue against that. I mean, I have a lot of studs on buy, and specifically with wide receiver position, I'm going to have to play like a kick returner. So we'll see. It's a little dicey if you ask me, but I have some depth at some of the spots where I have it, so I'm not going to get totally wrecked. I think Jaleel McLaughlin, if he ends up being productive again, might help compensate for that. But we'll see. I think in general, it's fair to say Sin has a better team, so I respect.
Part of the reason why I traded P. Ryan for Thielen was McLaughlin, just FYI.
Yeah, he looks like a wildebeest.
All right, the last game of the week, and it's the battle of Mandy, the second-ranked team, and yours truly, Sal, the third-ranked team, both 4-0 in division rivalry. What do you got?
Well, I hate to say this to your face, but I'm sure you won't be too offended. But I think on a short week, Justin Fields is going to get his ass handed to him. I don't think you're going to get a lot of points from him, but he's Justin Fields. He could scramble for enough to have a really bad game, and we will see on that, my friend. But head to head, you're going against the Miami quarterback, who's probably going to get very right against the Giants. And I think it's going to come down to like, does Saquon play or not? Because that gives you a 0 where it could be pretty bad, right? And so if Saquon sits, I really like this to be much more of a coin flip situation. That being said, he's already taken a 0 at one of the wide receiver positions. So if he gets 2 zeros, I mean, you probably should be beating him, right? And actually, even looking further down, he does have to play Grant Stewart, who is, unlucky for you, probably going to get snaps because Shaquille Leonard doesn't play, but he's not going to play much. The rest of his team is solid and has very, very high end. I mean, if Hassan Reddick and Josh Allen go off, and then you get a good Andrews game, Tyreek and Justin Jefferson go off with the quarterback, I mean, you're going to be in a tough spot just with a few guys, right? But I think if I had to, I don't believe Saquon Barkley is going to play. And B, I also don't think Devondre Campbell's going to play. That's going to be a big one for him as well. So if you end up getting 3 or 4 zeros on his side, I'm going to have to take you in this matchup. I think you are better equipped with the bye situation and the injury situation to handle this. But I think it's going to be a close match. But I'm going to give it to you, Sal. You're lucky, man. I wanted to be meaner, but it's the truth.
Yeah, well, I honestly think I'm going to lose. I think maybe that's probably me just kind of, reverse jinxing myself a little bit. I think it's going to be close. I don't care if Saquon plays. I honestly think that high ankle sprains are really awful to overcome. And putting him in that lineup with the way that offense is maneuvering, I don't think he has a 20-point game in him. So even if he gets 12 to 15 points, it's not scary seeing Saquon in the lineup, to be perfectly honest with you. I'm more concerned about, Higgins. I don't, even though he hasn't been super productive, like I am losing that explosive possibility of him. And I don't think that necessarily he's going to play or be 100%. I lost Fryermuth and I'm out David. So those are kind of the three hits. At the tight end position, I have other people that are scoring about the same amount of points as Fryermuth. So that's not a huge takeaway. So I'll be able to fill in the gap there. But yeah, I think, this is what kind of separates the men from the boys is weeks like this. And it'll be an interesting spot to be in. If I lose, I'm still okay, 4-1, and beating several people in the division and some tough competition. So either way, it's just a good checkpoint to see where we're at. So
It's
I'm gonna
interesting.
pick.
If Barkley doesn't play, you guys are dead even on their projected points, which I don't 100% believe in, but that is really how close this matchup is. It's nice.
It should be a good one. I expect us both to score in the 200 points. I don't think I've performed at the wide receiver position, especially as well as I could, and I have explosive players, just like he does across the board, except for maybe at safety and at cornerback. But the rest of the positions I can get points from as well. So Brian Robinson could have a big game, against the Bears, who are just holy. I bet he rushes for over 100 yards and gets a touchdown. Yeah, so we'll see. It's going to be a good one. So I think that's it, my friend. That is
What else was on our list?
We had, well, if you have time, we have questions from the pod.
From the Discord? We can do that fast. We can do that fast.
Yeah, I don't really have a ton to offer there, but the question was, what's the favorite trades you've ever made? And then kind of, we talked about kind of what the role of vetoes plays in our fantasy football league and our thoughts on vetoes in general. Have they been overlooked or have they been kind of have they been made to be too important? Or, looking back on some of the vetoes, have they really mattered as much as we made them a big deal when they did happen? I didn't do any research on that, so I don't know. But favorite trades for me is anytime that I make a deal with one of the Costa Rican guys and I feel like I got a little bit better end of the deal. I think I'm active. I like to make trades. I don't really care about winning one of them or losing them. I've definitely lost my fair share, especially early on. But I do like sticking it to you and Roman, especially, and every once in a while knowing when I press send and it's complete, that I feel pretty good and positive about it on my end. So that would be my favorite trades in general. And the Gabe Davis trade is always going to go down in history as the best trade ever, because
that's my favorite trade, and I'm not even in it.
He continues to produce, baby. He continues to produce for old Sal.
Not as much as Amon-Ra St. Brown and your boy Stevenson.
Again, he had to make those draft picks.
I know.
And he did a good job with them. So
he also had to trade for Gabe Davis.
Hindsight. I did. It could have easily been David Bell and fucking, someone else like that busted out in the late 20s, so it is what it is. Depends on a good drafter. Go ahead.
So
thoughts on vetoes and your best favorite trade?
Well, so my favorite trade is kind of tricky. I probably should have really pulled up what this was, but I traded into a draft at 201 and took Aaron Jones. So I had no picks every year I have no picks. And so I traded into the draft at, I think it was 201 and got Aaron Jones, and he's still on my team. And all he does is just put up mad points every year. So I think that's probably the best trade that I got that was profitable and that I can think of. There was one where I traded into like a fifth rounder and got Joe Schobert, who ended up starting for my team for like 5 or 6 years, putting up top five tackles. So that was pretty good. That was like the best start that I got. But if we want to say like trade players for trade players, it's so hard to remember in this league because like it's hard to do blockbuster deals. Every time I do a big deal, it's probably for picks, so you don't know what that looks like. And then the player for player stuff that I've done, like I traded Nick Moreau and Cameron Bynum, and that looks really bad now. It looked good at the beginning of the season, and I like the guys and the picks that I got and what I turned them into. I'm happy for my rebuild, but that looks terrible now.
Yeah. I mean, in this league, I went back and actually looked at the trades I made in the offseason to get to this point to where I have arguably a top 5 team. Because I kind of came out of nowhere, to be perfectly honest with you. I went, and just started trading heavily and finding assets where I was weak, especially on defense. And, I got Karlaftis and I got DeMar Davis for pretty much next to nothing. I got Daniel Hunter for a late second. I got Patrick Queen for like a fourth or something like that. It was hardly anything. Like, so there was a lot of action that I made on people were down prior to the switch of the IDP positions, and then just kind of gambles that I took on high draft players like Karlaftis. I think I traded a late first for him and he's performed, right? So I have to give myself a little bit of credit. Like, I have no draft capital for next year, but I did put myself in position kind of out of nowhere to be a competitive team. I made some mistakes though. I think I sent a first and a third for Terrence Marshall, got aggressive, our first, second, and third, and maybe even a fourth actually for him. And I quickly pivoted and kind of, was watching the news and just kind of, once they drafted Mingo, moved on from him and traded a first and for him and a second for Calvin Ridley, right? Like, so sometimes when you make you make a bad move, you have to quickly not be stubborn and move on from that move and protect yourself, right? And just get what you can get out. Like, you're not going to win every deal, but being active, you can certainly overcome it. I think I got Andre Cisco for fucking dog shit too, right? Like, I think that was a Wayne trade where I sent him something pretty minimal to get Andre Cisco, who's been a 50-point, scorer at safety position when I didn't really have much. So I think you just have to do your research, take some gambles, and when you hit, you celebrate, and when you don't, you move on quickly and try to minimize your losses. So I think the only regret that I have is I wish I did have a little bit of draft capital this year, because there might be one or two moves that I could make middle of the season to pick up a key player, going into the end of the season. But when I looked at it, there are very few guys in the top 12 that have significant
You
draft
wouldn't be in your
capital.
position with such a strong team if you did. Like
True.
I have to be realistic on that. This is the first year I kept all my picks. And I did it for
Yeah.
a reason because I really thought that I was going to be shallow enough and top heavy enough that it was going to flip and I was going to have to get capital when I needed to. Now, to everyone's complaining about everyone trading early. And to your point about there being lack of first round picks, now if I have guys who are good and I want to trade out of it, I probably can't even get a first round pick. I probably have to get
Right.
like young guys, and I'm not going to get or second rounders. And it's just so eventually when people are hoarding all the picks, it's a tougher move. That's why we stated last week, the more weeks you wait to decide to tank, the less value you're going to get for it. The only thing that flips on is if somebody's really willing to give you something good, or like an IR guy who will help you next year for sure, that that's what a lot of these trades are going to happen. And the value for the guys who out there listening, who, if you're in the middle of the pack and it becomes clear in 2 or 3 weeks that you can't get in the playoffs, be patient for somebody who is good, will have injury,
Yeah.
bad luck,
Cap space.
even if they can't give you picks, they'll probably just trade short-term value for long-term, and that's about the best you can hope for.
Right. Yeah, and a lot of cap space opens up, so some of those high value players can start getting moved around and shifted, and people, go all in the last 3 or 4 weeks of the season to get guys that they think they can give them 15, 20, 30 points in the playoffs, and they'll drop guys that are maybe scoring 5 to 10 but are long-term contracts. So there's a lot of movement to be made, but you're absolutely right. I think that you need to be aggressive early and late, not necessarily in the middle, because there's just kind of dead man's land. So
Hey, I mean, Roman's figuring out right now he can't even give a first round pick for a safety. I mean, what do you think it's going to cost to get a first round pick in 4 weeks? A
Well,
lot.
here's what's going to happen. People aren't going to get the same offer from Romaine because they're now not going to be in a position where they're going to be competitive. They're like, oh, okay, now I'll trade for that first. And Roman's going to know that. And he's going to say, nope, sorry. You'll get a second now if you want, but that's it. And
Yeah, even the
I don't
third round,
know.
even the third round pick for the cornerback, even though he's locked down for long term, he's cheap and he's going to be very good. He's not going to be a third round pick later, but if you get him early,
He can
everyone's
win
like,
you
oh, it's
football
not
games,
worth it. But it's like, man, like, I don't know. What if he averages
10 to
points more
12
than your
games.
next cornerback the whole way? It's tough to know. But like, I like
Yeah.
getting a trade like that earlier than like getting him later. That makes sense. So,
At the end of the day, you're not going to miss a third round pick if you make the playoffs and your cornerback scores 15 points that game. It's
no,
like
you're
it
going to
is what it is.
cash. You're going to cash, and we're just trying to cash
Yep.
with a
Yep.
shot to the bank.
Um, I think as far as the veto thing is concerned, I think we use it correctly. I think in all the time that I've been in this league, we've used it maybe once or twice to where it was actually processed and was pretty quick to come to that conclusion. I think maybe it was in CK. I don't remember the one that happened in the offseason with a newbie that we felt like was kind of taken advantage of or didn't know exactly what he was doing. I think that's what it's for. I don't get into the habits of looking at how people evaluate players. You can honestly assess that basically on some of the trade offers you get that are just insane. But people make deals. Like people like Warren make deals with other GMs, and so you don't really understand how people value contracts and how they value players or positions or what they're trying to accomplish from a strategy standpoint. So I think you have to be very careful of putting yourself in someone's shoes and managing their team the way that you would, because not everybody has the same strategies as you do. But when it's egregious and or it when it's egregious, you should definitely voice your opinion and use a veto, especially if it's super lopsided, but also just to protect new owners that maybe don't quite understand things
I think
the way
using
they should.
vetoes is great. I think the success rate's super low because when you use a
It
veto,
is.
everyone has a chance to defend themselves. And I think owners veer on like fairness and whether or not something is just flat out should be illegal. And most people lean that if it's justifiable, you have to let it go. And I think that's fair. And I think to further that, if it was a long-term dynasty league, right? With no contracts, it's a lot easier to go up and pull some rankings, be like, dude, this is like way lopsided. But when you're, to your point, paying 2 first-round draft picks for Gabe Davis because he's super cheap,
And a third.
well, whatever. It's like, okay, he wants a cheap contract. Keep contracts that if a guy becomes the lead in cheap contract, I was looking at it, like imagine having JJ for $77. It's like, oh, like, but see, if you have really good guys for cheap, like then they end up being a lead.
But
Like it's so much more valuable than, I had Stephon Diggs at 350, who's like almost worthless to everyone, even though he's a top 5 wide receiver. So like that's my point. My point is that when there's so much opinions on valuing players plus the value of long term chart versus short term and long and expensive versus cheap contracts, it's so many variables. It's just really hard to
right,
get a veto done. And I think there's many people who will refuse to vote because they don't like the veto in this league. And so that's where it's kind of broken, because even if we got 14 people and 18 people voted, you still don't veto a trade, right? So
right.
that's where it's like, okay, well, this is a mass majority, and that's happened before. And I don't know, does that need to be adjusted? The only way you can adjust that type of a rule is if everybody's using their vote veto and we see it happening with regularity. But if you use a veto, put it to veto. If people are voting against trades
You should
constantly,
almost be required to vote on league-wide issues to keep your spot as a GM. I don't think you should be able to abstain from veto votes personally. Like, there's no reason why you
well, the
shouldn't
problem is
vote.
it's 50% of the league, and if 40% doesn't vote, nothing will ever pass. And so it's not a representation. It's only
No, I
active women.
understand that. I'm saying everybody should be required to
I
vote.
know, but I mean, what are you gonna do? Kick them out of the league because they didn't vote for a veto that they didn't.
Yeah,
No,
I mean,
I would say
we
if you
have
don't
about half the
care,
owners that
if you
are
don't
active.
care,
Yeah,
always vote no. Just if you don't
yeah,
care,
that's
always vote
exactly
no.
it. That's fine.
Because then at
At
least we know there's a
least
sample size. Like, I'll never vote. I'll never vote. It's like, well, you never vote because you want to be involved, but just put no. Like,
I
it's
mean,
fine.
you should vote when it's obvious, right? Like there is a reason to veto things. There is. Like, I don't care what anybody
Nobody's
says.
taking
There
a
is.
veto personally. Nobody's taking a veto personally.
No,
Just nominate. Somebody will second nominate. That guy's going to defend himself. Put it to vote. The success rate's super low. That's it.
you don't need more vetoes, though. You don't need it. If you want to use it, use it. If you don't use it strategically. But it's not
I
even
would
a
love
strategic
to
thing.
see
It's just
10 vetoes. Everyone has the right to veto. I'd love to see
yeah.
10 a year. I'd love to see 10 a year because then we could get a sample size on whether or not the system is broken. But if people want to say the system's broken, but we don't have sample size, then we can't fix anything. But if we do 10 vetoes and it's like, okay, well, mass majority are voting every time to overturn these trades, and like we have absentee ballots, what do we want to do about that? And if you make it to where, well, those would have passed, then maybe people start voting. I don't know. I don't like changing rules, but if you want to address the issue with vetoes, you have to get a sample size, and we haven't had a sample size for quite a few years.
The bottom line is there isn't many cases in which a veto is actually going to be used and approved, and trade's going to be retracted. And it's so far that I've been involved, it's been used correctly. And that's it. Get involved, be an active person in the league, have your opinions, point out things that you think could be improved and or things that you enjoy, just like this podcast that we are going to veto right now the rest of time, because we are almost at 3 hours, and that is plenty. So we are out. Thanks for listening. Appreciate your comments in the Discord. Kind of
like, subscribe, and smash that like button. Wait, no.
Yeah, we like getting feedback. Makes us know that you're listening and that you appreciate us. Thanks, guys. Good luck this week. Peace out.
Have a good one.